Hello friends, we are Soul Fiction. Welcome to our channel. So in this video we will see what if Naruto was the son of Lucifer and became the legendary vampire of Integra Hellsing family. Also show us some love and subscribe and like this video. Thank you. Now let's begin the story. Chanting, that was all to be heard. Then someone started preaching in a strange language. Everything was black, he couldn't move, he tried but his malnourished muscles did nothing to the bindings holding him in place. The noise intensified. He struggled some more. Then pain. A sharp blinding pain erupted in his chest. And we send this spawn of Satan back into the hellfire from whence it came. That voice yelled, in a language he could understand, we cast this fiend back into the devil's domain. A message in which we proudly state that we, the children of Kami, shall never bow to the fires of hell. The pain in his chest worsened and something sharp completely sliced through his chest, through the ribcage and through the heart. Let our cries be heard, let our Lord hear our proud voices when we say, the demon fox is dead. Uzumaki Naruto, the demon in human form has been vanquished. The small child uttered a small cry, the still warm blood pooling around his small body. Tears soaked into the blindfold and he pleaded, begged, cried for anyone, anything to save him. But then the blade within his chest was cruelly twisted and before his vision faded to black he heard the voice recite a small prayer that made his already destroyed heart and mind darken. He felt a dark sensation overtake him as feelings of hate bubbled in his mind, hate for these people and hatred for what they worshipped. Angel from below. I wish to sell my soul. Devil take my soul, with diamonds you repay I don't care for heaven, so don't you look for me to cry. And I will burn in hell from the day I die. Those around got silent. The pain-filled voice of a child selling his soul made their hearts shiver and clench. Despite this thing being a demon, it still had the form of a child, the most innocent thing in existence. The boy's body got still, the blood pool stopped growing in size and to the child, everything became peaceful. Follow me now my child. A smooth and gentle voice called, making the child open his eyes and look around, only to find himself in a void. Do just as I say. A large rip in the void appeared, large torrents of flame spilling out and licking at anything it could burn. Jump by your own will or be taken by force, I'll get you either way. The child took a step forward, felling the heat of the fire as he neared. So reach down, grab my hand and walk with me through the land. He did as he was told and reached for the flames, which stretched out and licked at his fingertips as he neared, but strangely enough not burning him. Come home where you belong. Feeling of acceptance and warmth filled him. So come on. Jump in the fire, and so, without a second thought, the boy cast himself into the portal of flame, willingly throwing himself into lake of eternal fire, damning his immortal soul. Strange ghost-like figures made of flame swiped at him as he fell, but even if they hit, he would phase right through them, as if he wasn't solid or they were just illusions. The surrounding fire converged on him and started burning his clothing off, leaving him nude as he fell. Surrounding ghosts swarmed around him trying to maim his bare flesh but had no success. The child of prophecy has fallen, his soul willingly given. Killed by the herd of the shepherd, now he chants the blasphemous mockery of the Messiah. And curse the Holy Ghost, now the feeble kingdom of man shall bear witness to the greatest demon host. He fell and fell, into the depths of hell, deeper and deeper as the heat grew intense. He felt like he had a sunburn and the painful stinging started getting more annoying. Then the orange blaze got darker, replaced with a black haze. He looked up and saw the ghostly demons laughing down at him from a hole before it closed up in a flash. Then the child heard it, a deep and hateful growl. He tried to turn and saw the evil demons scowl. Boy, do you know what you've done? The monstrous creature demanded. You have damned me back to hell, our souls were not for sale. Naruto looked at him in slight fear, but another voice broke in. Kyuubi, leave the boy alone. You hold no power here. The boy spun around and jumped in fright as he saw a person standing behind him. It was a man with a dark tan, wearing a black suit. He had smooth black hair slicked back perfectly and a trimmed goatee. His face was twisted into a charming smirk and had no signs of aging. For all intents and purposes, he looked just like a man in his prime. He looked down to Naruto. Welcome to hell, young Uzumaki, I have plans for you. Naruto shook involuntarily. What? The man chuckled. You have cursed the heavens and sold your soul. I never thought that I would ever get hold of your soul. much less a soul as young as you. This must be a major blow to the kingdom of heaven. Naruto took a step back. What are you going to do with me? I shall mold you in my image and train you in the ways of hell. You shall be my hand on earth and spread darkness across the land, corrupting the masses and wreaking havoc however you please. The man spoke darkly. The child will fade to oblivion, and out of the shadows in your heart, you shall be reborn. As Naruto, the son of Lucifer. So this is the base of operations for these low-level trash, A man, extremely tall and lanky in appearance, with long, dark hair, stood before the entrance to some old ruins in the middle of a forest. He was dressed oddly, wearing a Victorian-style suit, covered with a long, red coat and topped with a wide-brimmed fedora, which almost completely hid his face. He pushed his round, orange-tinted glasses up his nose, the goggle-like sides hiding his glowing crimson eyes, and started forward. Let's hope they're at least mildly entertaining. An elderly gentleman dressed in a nice suit and wearing a monocle with black hair that was pulled into a ponytail, frowned. Don't play around here, Alucard. Sir Integra wants this operation done as quickly as possible. Of course, Walter. I always aim to please. Alucard smiled, showing his numerous sharp teeth and drawing his silver handgun, the Hellsing Arms .454 Casul. Walter's expression didn't change. I'm serious, Alucard. There is something strange here. Finding out about this place was extremely taxing. We suspect that this is a stronghold for a stronger than usual vampire. Alucard's grin got even wider. Good, then maybe today won't be so boring after all. An hour later, Alucard stood in the middle of an underground chamber that was made to look like an unholy place of worship. Unholy symbols were carved into the walls and a large pentagram was drawn on the floor in dry blood. All over the room laid piles of dust from the destroyed ghouls, while some had only been crippled, now laying on the floor moaning and groaning as they were unable to stand. There had been multiple vampires as well. Most had been weak fledglings, but the last, one that had been dressed as a mockery of a priest, had given him only a bit of trouble, but he was dead now. You, bastard, turning, he saw the priest standing up slowly, the large hole in his chest pouring blood everywhere on his black robes while a golden pentagram hung around his neck. So you managed to survive a bullet to the heart, Alucard mused with a bit of surprise. They were right, you are stronger than normal vampires we deal with. The unholy priest coughed up blood. You're a vampire as well. Why'd you do this? Alucard frowned. Because vermin like you make me sick, kidnapping and killing humans for sport. The vampire laughed weakly. Sport? You think this was for sport? He slowly turned and stumbled towards a stone altar, not caring when he heard Alucard reload his gun and the hammer back. We took those people, not out of sport, but for tribute. Alucard tribute? To our Lord. Pulling the trigger, Alucard shot the vampire's leg off, sending him to the floor with a yell. You disgust me, sacrificing humans to your heathen god. God? The vampire chuckled. No, not a god, but those humans, were needed to serve a higher cause. Turning over, the vampire laid on his back and continued to laugh. I've spent my entire life devoted to this cause. With the sacrifice of the final virgin, he shall return to this world. And who might this being be? The blood stopped pouring and the vampire gave a small smile as the light left his eyes. Phileas, Lux, fair. Watching as the body turned to dust, Alucard looked at the stone altar that was covered in blood before leaving to report to his master. She would want to know about this. Not an hour later, the outside of the ruins were cordoned off as Hellsing soldiers were securing the area while others were studying the ruins. Walter and Alucard stood by as Sir Integra Hellsing arrived by helicopter and stepped out. She had long, pale blonde hair that framed her pretty face and wore a pair of round, wire-framed glasses upon the bridge of her nose. She was dressed in a green olive drab business suit with a blue necktie pinned down by a golden cross. Her cold, sharp blue eyes looked around as her hair was tossed around by the downdraft of the slowing rotor blades of the aircraft. Catching sight of Walter and Alucard, she walked over. What's the situation? Sir Integra, Alucard has cleared the ruins of the targets but has found something. Well, something hard to believe. Walter started while adjusting his monocle. Well, what was it? It has to be something horrid if it calls for all this, she demanded while motioning to the soldiers and researchers. Alucard chuckled. Something amazing yet terrifying, my master, he told her with a grin. It seems that the lowly vampires of this coven had used their victims in hopes of resurrecting their lord, the Filius Lux Fair. Having studied the occult, Integra recognized the language as Latin but was a bit rusty. Taking a moment to translate it to herself, she stopped and looked the vampire in the face, her face pale and eyes wide. "Are you sure of this?" He nodded. Yes, he was clear in his final words. He truly believed that Filius Lux Fair would be released upon the mortal world. "Dear Lord," she muttered with a silent prayer. Walter, who wasn't knowledgeable in the Latin language, cleared his throat. "Pardon me, Sir Integra, but what does Filius Lux Fair mean?" Alucard turned and answered before the womankind, "A being of legend, one that I would love to battle, the Son of Lucifer." Once the team of Hellsing soldiers finished their sweep of the ruins, they reported in that it was safe. Following Integra, Walter, and Alucard, a team of researchers went down into the unholy church to check it out. Approaching the altar, a large stone block with a large pentagram carved on the top, they noticed some writing on edges. Deriacta ab inferno ossa lapis magnus I acuit capti signata in urnum. Date munera unto me quinque pura et licida revertar, Integra said while touching each word. Alucard, knowing that Walter didn't understand the language, along with a few others, so he translated, "Forsaken by hell my ashes lay trapped, sealed within the great stone urn. Give unto me the 5 offerings of pure liquid life and I shall return." She then reached another line and rubbed her finger along to clear some dry blood so that she could read it. "In nomine Patris me sacrificebant sanguine eorum ah." Pulling her hand back as she cut her finger on a sharp point, which easily cut through her glove, Integra clenched her hand to stop the bleeding, only to notice a fresh drop of her blood on the edge that she had been cut by. The blood then moved and seeped into the stone, almost as if it had been alive, and suddenly, she was thrown back by an invisible force only to be caught and set down by Alucard. "What the hell?" she exclaimed before the stone altar glowed, a purplish-red light shining trough, a small crack that got larger and larger while branching out into more cracks. A few of the soldiers that were there drew their weapons and aimed them while Alucard moved in front of his master to protect her. Suddenly, the light faded. Some relaxed, but this proved to be a mistake as soon the stone altar exploded. "Ha ha ha!" echoed a deep, demonic laugh throughout the room. "Free, at last." They watched in horror as a silhouette stood up in the dust of the stone rubble and threw his head back to laugh, 2 large feathery wings exploding from his back. With a few flaps, the dust was blown away and they got a cleat view of the thing. It was tall, but not Alucard tall, reaching 6 feet. Its chest was muscled and bare while he had a pair of black hanging off his hips with a thick chain around his waist. On his head was a thick, spiky mane of golden blonde hair while a pair of sharp black horns curved out from his skull just above his ears and twisted to point out above his forehead. Lastly, right in the middle of his forehead, opened a third eye. He turned, gazing at the group with his demonic eyes, a mix between yellow, black, red, and orange, while his black feathery wings folded behind him. One of the soldiers, terrified at what he was seeing, opened fire on the demon, which caused the others to do the same. Bullets riddled the blonde monster, but he never even flinched the whole time as they emptied their clips. It chuckled, the wounds on its chest, face, and arms closing before bent forward, opening his mouth and dropping hundreds and hundreds of Hellsing issued rounds on the floor. Raising its head, the demon looked at the group and locked eyes with Integra. "You, girl, your name?" Watching as it slowly approached, its black boots thumping on the stone as he approached, Integra put on a brave face. "I am Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingets Hellsing, head of the Hellsing organization." The demon stopped as Alucard blocked his way. Looking at the vampire, his eyes flashed and without warning, Alucard was thrown across the chamber where he slammed into the wall with a bone-shattering crunch. Everyone looked to the vampire, then to the demon, only to find him kneeling on one knee in front of Integra. "In nomine Patris me sacrificebant sanguine eorum, tu alas meas et discernir me mansueta." It spoke before lowering its head in submission. Integra looked down at the demon in shock. Alucard stood with a large insane grin. "I knew I heard that before," he laughed. "Give me the blood of the enemies to my father's name, to sever my wings and make me tame." 1996. 2 years later, Integra Hellsing, now 20 years old, sat at her desk in her large, yet barren office smoking a cigar while thinking over the past 2 years. Some would think that having the son of the devil himself working for you would be dangerous and downright insane, but in truth, it was rather interesting and lively. She admitted that at first it was a bit awkward with him looking demonic, but after voicing her concern, he found that he could shape-shift and ridded himself of his demonic features until he looked like a normal blonde-haired blue-eyed human and called himself Naruto. A small tremor shook her seat, causing her to sigh. She pressed the button on her intercom. Walter. Already knowing what she was going to ask, Walter replied, "Yes sir Integra, they're sparing again." The only problem was that Alucard took joy in having a powerful being around him, always picking and prodding at each until they fought. So far the score was 129 to 174 in Naruto's favor because he always ended up doing something to the vampire that stunned him and left him standing in shock. The last time he had somehow replaced Alucard's clothing with a pink frilly tutu during the fight and vanished without a trace. Dodging left and right as Alucard fired round after round at him, Naruto, dressed in only his black pants and boots, chuckled as every round missed him. "You must do better than that Alucard," he taunted while back-flipping bullet. "You may be the strongest vampire in existence, but you have never been forced to fight in hell. I haven't even used any of my true power." A sudden crippling pain in his forearm cut him off and Naruto found himself on the stone floor of the Hellsing mansion dungeon. "Fuck," he growled, looking up and finding his stump of a forearm gushing blood. "You were saying?" Alucard asked while grinning back, holstering his weapon as the deal was that the first to deal major damage or sever a major body part 1. The severed arm burst into black, hellish flames, not even leaving ashes or marking the stone. Once it died out, the stump of an arm caught fire, expanding before going out to reveal a perfectly unblemished arm. Fine, you win this round." Naruto huffed before standing. He then smirked and looked at the vampire, but then again, what was the score now, your 130 to my 174? He grinned at the vampire's scowl and hooked one thumb in his pants, and besides, throwing the other hand out, a sudden blur shot forward and Alucard suddenly found himself stuck to a wall by a black knife. "I only have my knives, I have yet to find a suitable firearm that could withstand my powers." The vampire chuckled, the knife in his lower chest not bothering him at all as he pushed himself off and onto the floor. "If you didn't channel your demonic magic into them you wouldn't have that problem. Do not get me wrong. Walter makes impressive weaponry, but they are useless to me if they fail after being infused with my power. Holy bullets are powerful, but my demonic magic will damage anything, holy or unholy." He mused before stopping and concentrating. "We will have to cut this short, Sir Integra is calling." Alucard watched as the blonde just vanished, as if he had never been there before. 1999. 3 years later, in a dark, barren chamber of the Hellsing dungeons, Naruto sat on a throne-like chair on the far wall, directly across from the door with a desk on his left and a nightstand on his right. One wall was made into a large bookcase and was loaded with books of all kinds, while the opposite wall had a normal twin-sized bed against the stone. Candles littered the room, casting shadows and flickering light across the stone room while he sat and waited until the night. Sir Integra had informed him that he and Alucard would be sent on a mission to destroy a vampire in the village of Cheddar. Well, Alucard was going to destroy the vampire. He was to remove the village from the map as only ghouls remained. The door to his room opened, revealing Walter. "Excuse me Naruto, but I have something for you that you might like." The butler walked in, carrying a pair of metal cases as he approached. "I've taken the liberty of having those strange blades you gave me melted down and used them to forge a weapon for you to use," he explained before setting the cases down and opening the first. "Due to the lack of metal and the difficulty of forging it, I only had enough to create one sadly." Picking up the gun, Walter handed it to the blonde. It was short, just under a foot long. The barrel was a solid purplish black, looking tainted and evil, which was to be expected as the knives he had given Walter were a few of what he used in hell. It had a gray pistol grip and no stock at all, with a silver Hellsing coat of arms on each side of the grip. This is a custom-made 12-gauge single shot, modeled after a Browning BT-99 trap gun. Its grip is made of a composite material with a diamond grip pattern, Walter explained with a hint of pride. A custom choke has been installed, increasing the effective range from 20 yards to 40 when using standard silver buckshot. I have also provided a range of special ammunition that you may find to your liking, such as some experimental British-made Frag 12, incendiary shells, and of course both standard silver slugs and buckshot. Opening the barrel, Naruto studied it for a moment. "It's perfect, Walter." The man smirked. "I aim to please," he replied before opening the next case. I also brought you this. Looking at the offered weapon, Naruto noticed that it was a normal .45mm1911 pistol with a rubber grip. You know these don't last long, he told the man while taking it, spinning it on his finger and aiming both weapons at the far wall. Walter nodded, yes, but I brought it because your shotgun is rather slow to reload, you may need something in a pinch. This military-issue M1911A1 is loaded with similar rounds as Alucard's Casul, but I must warn you, the recoil is rather bothersome due to the bullets. I'll manage. As soon as night set in, both Alucard and Naruto set off for the village of Cheddar, which had police crawling all over due to a woman being kidnapped and tracked back to the village. Integra and Walter went to the police base camp in the area to inform them that the Hellsing organization now officially had command of the situation because the thing that they were after was not human, but a vampire. What, are you serious? The commanding police officer asked in a disbelieving tone, looking at the woman in doubt while the two men beside him looked a bit nervous, not that he noticed as her butler removed the large coat from her shoulders and held it for her. I'm sorry, but could you repeat yourself one more time? Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Hellsing, is it? Very well, she stated, I'll say it again, they're ghouls, and the village of Cheddar had become a den of ghouls. Integra told them while turning around and looking them in the eye. A ghoul is what happens to deflowered humans after they're bitten by a vampire. They're much like zombies under the control of a vampire, and that means there's a vampire in Cheddar. The chief snorted, that's ridiculous, he said with a mocking laugh as the men beside him looked bemused now. Vampires? Do you really expect me to believe this occult nonsense? Walter shot the man a look while opening a cigar case for Integra as she replied, what would a cheap bureaucrat such as yourself know anything on the matter? How dare you even question my credentials? The Hellsing organization has been defending the British Empire for generations. Before anyone else could speak, another voice spoke from behind the three men standing across from Integra, Madame Hellsing. The men jumped in fright, turning and backing away from the sudden appearance of a blond man with blue eyes wearing no shirt and black pants. Naruto, what's the situation? Smirking at the police, he then turned to Integra, the police unit sent in has been killed. A single girl lives, for now, Alucard is nearing the village as we speak. The infestation will soon be handled. He reported while walking around the table. This is absurd. The bureaucrat growled, all of this nonsense about the occult and vampires. What's next? You going to tell me that he's a vampire? The three chuckled at the man. Vampire? Integra laughed, of course not. Naruto nodded with a smirk, I'm something much more. He mused while holding up his hand to the cigar in Integra's mouth, snapping his fingers to make a small black flame appear and light the cigar. Something darker. One of the men fainted as Naruto's eyes flashed red. Appearing in the clearing where Alucard was, Naruto saw their target and a small mob of ghouls armed with weapons standing across from him while Alucard lay in a pool of blood on the grass. Is that the best you? Started the vampire only to notice the new person standing over the mutilated Alucard. Who the hell are you? Ignoring him and the frightened human off to the side, Naruto looked down at Alucard and kicked him. Get your lazy ass up, you're not fooling anyone with that shit, he growled before kicking him again. Fine, I'll just kill them all by myself. Alucard's body stood on its own, black mist reforming the many holes and missing parts of his body as he glared at the blonde. Can I help it if I want to see his power? Naruto hummed, let's just massacre these ghouls and take care of the vampire, he said while pulling out the shotgun from a holster on the front of his N close to 30 shotgun shells while his pistol was on the back. He aimed the gun and fired, silver buckshot reducing a few to dust before pulling a new shell from his belt and reloading, this time causing a decent-sized explosion while Alucard also began shooting. Naruto holstered his gun and pulled out the pistol before firing until no ghoul was left, leaving only the vampire shaking in fear. Well, that was dull, he sighed, you handle the vampire, I got a village to erase. Not even an hour later, he met Sir Integra who was standing by her limo with Walter. The village of Cheddar is no more. Splendid work. Now where's Alucard? Raising an eyebrow, Naruto looked behind him. Strange, I was sure he'd make it back before me. After all, I did leave him to deal with a single lowly vampire. She massaged her temples. Somehow I just know he's done something to spite me. Not too long after she left, Alucard appeared, carrying the blonde police girl in his arms. Naruto noticed the large, slowly healing hole in her chest and the marks on her neck. A fledgling? Really, Alucard? He asked. It was her choice. He grinned. Naruto raised an eyebrow, still feeling her slowly growing powers. Was that before or after shooting her? He asked only to get a larger grin in response. Never mind, just promise me one thing. Alucard gave him a questioning look. Just make sure I'm around when you tell Integra. Naruto winced as Integra shot Alucard in the balls with her Walther PPK, which, by the smell of burning flesh, was loaded with incendiary rounds. What were you thinking? She demanded hotly while holding the gun, her eye twitching madly. It's bad enough dealing with you, but now another vampire? She then turned on him. And where were you when this was happening? Blinking, Naruto looked down the barrel, burning cheddar to the ground. She nodded, turning the gun back to Alucard and shooting him again. After Integra let Alucard go, Naruto returned to his chambers to take a nap. He didn't need sleep, nor food, but he enjoyed both and still dreamed from time to time. Boy, you dare betray me? Lucifer raged at him as they squared off. I took you in, remade you in my image, raised you, trained you. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me. Glaring at the devil, Naruto scoffed. I am no fool. I've known of your treachery for years. He growled hatefully. Is it really that big of a shock? That I would abandon you and? Ahaha. Naruto's nap was interrupted by a loud frightened scream, making him roll out of bed and crash onto the floor. Hours later, Alucard faded through the wall into Naruto's room with a large smirk on his face, only to see the barrel of the blonde's shotgun aimed right for him. I'd shoot you if it wasn't for the fact that it'd blow a hole in my wall, the demonic blonde said before holding it up, showing that the black foregrip now had a silver plate on the bottom with Anilium 21:16 engraved on it. Chronicles 21:16, Alucard mused after reading it, the verse describing the archangel Azrael, if I remember correctly. Naruto nodded, turning away. Between heaven and earth stands Azrael with blade drawn in hand, and he is the destruction of all. He is the angel of death. Strange that you would put that on you weapon. Alucard spoke still halfway through the wall. I have my reasons. The blonde exclaimed, but anyway, how'd your fledgling do on her first mission? Alucard chuckled, good considering that she took the shot. She still clings to her human mindset and it took some coaxing to make her kill the target. So she's having trouble adjusting to vampirism. Naruto hummed, I wonder what she'll do when Walter gets around to replacing her bed with a coffin. All that aside, I've come to tell you that tomorrow night we will be going to Ireland for a mission. Naruto raised an eyebrow. We as in you and me? Alucard shook his head. No, we as in you, police girl, and me. Does she know about me? The Vampire King grinned and chuckled. She knows of you, as in being agent of Hellsing, but not that you are the son of Lucifer. Oh, this'll be fun. Now both of you stop that. A very tall, lean man with broad shoulders called with a Scottish accent as he saw two small children fighting. He had short, spiky blondish gray hair and green eyes behind a pair of small round glasses. On his left cheek was a large wedge-shaped scar that ran down to his heavy-set squared jaw that was covered in stubble. Pulling the two children apart as they stood in front of an orphanage, he held their shoulders and gave them a friendly smile. There's no fighting among friends. How do you expect to get to heaven acting like that? Sorry, father, the two orphans said while looking up to the tall priest, getting a kind smile from him. Listen, violence is never the right answer, except when used against heathens, he told them while looking up, seeing an older man approaching. Looking back down to the children, he told them to run up to their rooms before giving a small wave to the approaching man dressed in white priest's robes. To what do I owe this visit? The blonde priest asked as they walked down to the sidewalk in front of the orphanage. The older priest walked slightly behind him. I'm afraid we've been hearing a lot of bad news lately, he said slowly, from England. The other nodded. They've been working hard to keep it quiet. Yes, vampires, there have been many more attacks recently within their borders. Far too many to be pure coincidence. The blonde man smirked. Well, if a vampire wants to eat some Protestants, how's that our problem? The other man was stone-faced. But there's more. Hellsing, they're a problem. They've been holding a stronger front than we've expected, keeping damage to a minimum. They're nothing but amateurs. Hellsing is practically a kindergarten compared to us. The scared priest smirked. The Catholics, the Vatican, and the Iscariots, we were fighting against the forces of darkness centuries before the Hellsing organization even existed. So why are you here? Surely if the problem is in England, then the English can handle their own problems? It's not just in England. What? There's been an attack in Ireland, the northern point in a little village. Hellsing is on the move and we will not sit back and watch. Also, there is rumors of Hellsing having another pet monster. Another vampire? The old man started walking, passing the blonde. We are not sure, but we know that it is another abomination against God. Go and take care of this attack, destroy the vampire before Hellsing. And if I run into the Hellsing agents? The old man stopped and turned. Remember, we are a part of God's divine instrument on earth. We do not back down when challenged by heretics. Naruto smirked from the shadows of Hellsing Manor as he silently crept around without even a distortion of air as he found who he was looking for. Sarah's Victoria was around 19, maybe 20 years old, with short, somewhat messy blonde hair and innocent blue eyes. She wore a tight yellow Hellsing uniform with a skirt, white stockings, and tall brown boots. The uniform greatly showed off her well-developed figure, especially her large. He couldn't wait to see how she changed once she finally accepted her powers and grew. He could sense an inner darkness within her, one that humans got from traumatic experiences in the past, usually developing into violent tendencies or withdrawal, but there was also a bright and shining light. She was a good person, a light that stands out from the darkness. So you're the police girl, he drawled while letting himself be seen, making her spin around and yelp loudly. Pointing a finger at him, she gaped. Why, who are you? Sweat dropping, Naruto huffed. I'm Naruto. Oh, she nodded. I'm Sarah's Victoria, nice to meet you. The sweat drop on the back on his head grew in size. He had expected her to be shocked or stuttering at least. Damn that Alucard, he thought venomously. He just had to scare he so bad that just suddenly appearing out of nowhere didn't bling as he stood on the bottom floor of a large mansion on a hill somewhere in Ireland. Naruto walked the halls with his pistol in hand, picking off one or two ghouls here and there while crushing the skulls of those that got near. He could hear gunshots above him, the deep thumping bangs from Alucard's casoul and the longer booms from Sarah's Hellsing Arms Anti-Midian's 13.7mm rifle. It had originally been for him, but upon ruining the barrel Walter and him decided to stick with pistols and smaller arms. Turning his head as a small pistol bullet flew past his ear, Naruto drew his shotgun and splattered the ghoul's entire upper body with an explosive round. Twisting around, he planted his boot in a charging ghoul's face and killed it. These ghouls are pathetically weak, he mused to himself before sniffing. Strange, I smell something. Grinning, he chuckled, holy. Alucard grinned as Sarah's punched a ghoul and stomped on its head, her face twisted into a cruel toothy grin while her eyes were now a bloodthirsty red. The ghoul under her foot made pitiful groans before its head was crushed, blood spraying everywhere, even on Sarah's face. Now you are understanding what it is to be a vampire, Alucard said to her with a pleased smirk. She looked down at her hand, the brown leather glove covered in blood. Breathing heavily, she slowly brought it to her face and slowly stuck out her tongue to lick it, making Alucard's smirk widen as she began to accept her power. A small blur shot towards her back, impacting with her neck. Alucard's eyes widened as a blessed bayonet sliced through his fledgling, followed by 9 more that cut through her body with ease. Sarah's fell to the ground with a pained whimper as hundreds of papers blew down the hall and nailed themselves to the walls, creating what Alucard recognized as a holy barrier. He turned as he heard the floor behind him creaking and saw a grinning man on the other end of the hall, holding 2 blades in his grasp just like what was used on Sarah's. We are the servants of God and the messengers of his justice, we are the instruments of his divine wrath on earth. We are called upon to cleanse his kingdom, bringing ash from the flesh of thine enemies. He spoke while raising the 2 blessed blades and holding them in the shape of a cross. Back at Hellsing Manor, Walter walked into Sir Integra's office. Sir, a report from our Vatican intelligence officer, it reads. Our fears confirmed. The Vatican Special Operations Iscariot organization is on the move. Iscariot, Special Operations, Integra repeated while cutting the end of her cigar off. The most powerful agents the Vatican commands. Professional exorcists. Assassins trained to deal with demons and heretics. They're working under Section 13, a black operation unit. How large a force did they send? Just 1 agent was deployed. The Paladin, Father Alexander Anderson. Her eyes widened. Did you say Alexander Anderson? She repeated, more of a statement than a question. He nodded. Integra looked a bit nervous. God knows what would happen if he ran into Alucard and the girl, much less Naruto. The seriousness of what was said hit them. I'm leaving immediately, fetch my gun, my sword, and prepare 2 bodyguards. As her master and Anderson stared at each other, Sarah's groaned in pain while trying to move, making the priest chuckle. Your voice sounds so very lovely when you're whimpering in agony, young lady. Don't worry though, you aren't dying. I haven't pierced your heart. She heard him say coolly as she turned her head to look at him, only to see his outline, shining glasses, and the golden cross he wore around his neck. It's been a while since I've had a good hunt. Behind his glasses, Alucard narrowed his eyes. Vatican Special Division 13, the Iscariot organization. Anderson smirked. Right you are, you pathetic Hellsing dog, he said while walking forward. You must be Alucard, the housebroken vampire. She must be Hellsing's newest pet, kind of weak in my opinion. Sarah's winced at the pain but noticed a pair of glowing evil eyes in the shadows behind the priest, as did Alucard. You mean police girl? He smirked. No, she is merely a fledgling to me. She is not my master's newest pet, as you would say. Anderson shrugged. Pity, I would have loved to meet it, just before I sent both of her pets back in pieces. The vampire chuckled. Who says he's not here? Every one of the pages on the walls that made up the holy barrier burst into flames. Blackish red flames that devoured the paper and destroyed even the ash left behind, melting the nails that held them in place and leaving small pools of liquid hot metal on the floor. What sorcery is this? Anderson growled in shock as his holy barrier was destroyed. Naruto chuckled from behind him, a deep rumbling chuckle that didn't belong to a human, it belonged to a monster. Your little barrier was pathetically easy to get around, he laughed as Anderson turned. I must say, though, they have gotten a bit stronger over the years since I've last encountered them. So you're the new dog of Hellsing, the priest mocked. It must be my lucky day. I've already killed 1 vampire, now I'll kill 3 more. The man threw his arms forward with a yell, sending 20 of his holy blades flying from his sleeves, each blade glinting in the moonlight as they flew gracefully towards the shirtless, smirking blonde. From his back, Naruto's wings burst out and shielded him from the blades, knocking them back with a mighty flap and sending them clattering to the floor before covering his body entirely. Sarah's let out a pained gasp at the sight of the wings that blocked the blonde from view while Anderson's eyes widened. An angel? He muttered in awe, a real messenger of God. He, Naruto chuckled before opening his wings, revealing his now demonic form. Not quite, Judas Priest. Ever so slowly, horns grew from his skull as he grinned, teeth sharpening into razor-sharp points. His fingernails sharpened and turned black. Demon. Anderson growled. I should have known that Hellsing would stoop so low as to summon your kind. Ha ha ha, you holy dogs haven't changed a bit. You preach non-violence and pray for sinners yet harm the so-called heretics. Naruto spoke as his third eye opened. Shut your mouth, demon. You know nothing. Is that so? The winged blonde mused. There is no reasoning with your kind, ignorant, sinful human. The Lord preaches of peace, understanding, and unity, yet you Vatican dogs would sooner hang those different from you. Their beliefs are wrong, monster. They will burn in hell. That made Naruto chuckle harder. No, it is not wrong to worship another way, as long as you live righteously, be faithful to God, and are good of heart. Admittance into heaven is assured. God loves all faithful believers. Honestly, I don't see why your kind hate vampires. Vampires suck the blood of humans and make their victims their slaves. Perhaps the same could be said of all religion. After all, Roman Catholicism is merely willing mental and spiritual slavery to the Vatican. You'll pay for speaking ill of the Vatican, Anderson snarled, and how would you know? You nothing more than a lowly demon. I know more than you would think, priest, Naruto snipped, but 'tis not I who will suffer. Before Anderson could blink, Naruto was gone and he was suddenly airborne with a crippling pain in his back. He crashed into the floor and looked down to see one of his own blades piercing his torso, and behind him stood the blonde demon with his arms crossed. I usually have no qualms with the religions of this world, but your kind are grating on the nerves. I wouldn't care if your entire religion were to commit mass suicide, he said while spiting. It was ignorant fools such as you that caused me to be made. Anderson stood, glaring at the demon while Alucard leaned against the wall to watch. Pulling out another set of blades, he glared, only for a sudden round of gunfire to shatter each one. Now, we'll have none of that, Integra said with unturned, still with the blade in his back. Sir Integra Wingate Hellsing, to what do I owe the honor? The Hellsing organization have this situation under control. This is a direct breach of our agreement. You will leave this place now. Anderson smirked at the woman. You really expect me to run screaming from a British Protestant whore? He finished with a roar and rushed forward, pulling the blade from his back as the two bodyguards next to Integra opened fired. He killed them both and attacked Integra, only for her to block it and lock blades with him. An artificial regenerator agent, Integra snipped as she held him back with ease. So they've upgraded your healing. How pathetic. Oh, and it's not me you need to fear, it's the one who you just fought. I fear no lowly demon. He started only for Integra to laugh. A lowly demon? She repeated with mirth in her voice. He is no lowly demon. He is the son of the devil himself, the spawn of Lucifer. Naruto's clawed hand came down on Anderson's head, his palm flattening his hair before his fingers clasped round his skull. And as you should know, my father was a fallen angel. I know all about your pathetic religions. He growled before slinging the man aside and slamming Anderson face first into the wall. Anderson growled and fought as his face was slowly slid across the old wooden walls, while the demon laughed. He was unable to speak and could feel the cartilage in his nose breaking along with his cheekbones and jaw. It wasn't until Integra ordered the monster to stop a minute later when he was released and thrown aside. I think you get the point. Integra mocked as the priest held his nose and popped it back into place. So what are you going to do next? Anderson stood slowly. All right, I'll leave, he told her with a glare before pulling out a larger Bible. I'll need further preparation for these monsters. The priest opened his book and flipped through the pages. We'll meet again, Hellsing, he called as golden pages floated around him. Next time, I'll butcher you. Naruto crossed his arms and shape-shifted back to his human form. Well, that was a waste of time, he muttered, his voice losing the deepness and demonic tones. Integra walked up to him and looked him in the face. Are you all right? Naruto nodded. Yes, it's been a while since I've dealt with fools like him. Turning, Naruto walked up to Ceres as Alucard talked to Integra, asking her if she would send him to destroy the shadow organization behind creating the freaks. Hold still, police girl, he told her softly before grabbing the handle of one of the blessed blades, causing his hand to steam and hiss as he pulled all 10 out one by one, dropping them to the side afterward. Why did you turn her into a vampire? Integra questioned Alucard. Why indeed, for fun, for sport, maybe it was just a whim, but that doesn't sound like me. Perhaps after years spent with humans, I might be developing a sense of whimsy, he mused without his usual grin or smirk. Let's go, police girl. Thanking Naruto, Ceres stood up. Yes sir, my master, she replied happily before running up to him. But you see sir, my name's not police girl, it's Ceres Victoria sir. Alucard turned to her, smirking. Enough, you are a police girl, so police girl will do. Oh, you're mean? She pouted with the rifle on her shoulder before chasing after him again. Integra watched them with a pleased smirk while holding the cigar she lit before between her teeth. That's quite thing for you to say, she spoke knowing that Alucard would hear her, just what I'd expect from the king of vampires, or a count. Naruto walked over and stood next to her with his arms crossed. Ceres Victoria, she's a strange one. Oh, Integra mused. How so? She's a light shining in darkness, nothing like us. She still hesitates to take a life, even if it is the right thing to do and will free an innocent soul. One wouldn't expect the devil's son to speak like that. She snipped at him, only to be pressed into the wall as Naruto leaned over her with a grin. Nor would one suspect that Integra Hellsing, the Iron Maiden, the Virgin Countess, had long since lost her right to be called a maiden 3 years ago. He chuckled with his face inches from her own. I was a young fool at the time, she snapped, still smirking, but her voice was a bit forceful. It meant nothing to me. Naruto just leaned closer, his hot breath brushing against her lips. You need not lie, my queen. I can feel your heart race. Your feelings of joy soar when we are near. You might hide it for everyone else, but not from me. He whispered softly to her. Do you remember? Walter and Alucard were gone. You crept to my chambers like a child sneaking a peek before Christmas. I know I do. I still remember every curve, every flawless inch of your body as it pressed against mine. A light blush appeared on her cheeks. Your giggles, your squeaks, all those little sounds you made as I ran my fingertips down your body, the moans you made as I licked your most delicate places, even the scream and whimpers you made as I made you a woman and held you close. All burned within my memories," he continued deeply as he leaned around her and licked her earlobe, making her shudder. "You may lie to me, my queen, you may say that it meant nothing, but no matter what, it will mean something to me." "That's enough," she exclaimed forcefully, pushing him back and turning to hide the growing redness of her cheeks. "What happened, happened. We will not speak of this anymore. I cannot and will not have it be known that I gave my innocence to the devil's son." Naruto hummed, "As you wish, my queen. But as I've already told you, born mortale ex utero fiere immortalis trans sepulchrum." She looked back at him only to find him missing. He had told her years ago that he was born a human but made a demon long ago. The thing he told her was a Latin phrase that said, "Born immortal from the womb, made immortal beyond the tomb." She hadn't gotten much detail at the time, just that a religious group had murdered him in the name of God, making him sell his soul out of spite. He had only told her that because she had been shocked with herself for eloping with a demon, fearful that she may have gotten pregnant. "Damn you, Naruto," she sighed, "making me feel this way." Sir Integra Hellsing sat in her place at the head of an oval-shaped table with 11 older men, all dressed in suits. "Well now," started the oldest man, sitting directly across from her at the other end, "the situation must be quite dark if you have the gall to call a round-table meeting conference. Am I right, Sir Integra?" Leaning on her elbows with her fingers intertwined over her face, she gave a simple, yes, staring at the man with a small, barely noticeable smirk on her face. Civilian reports of vampire attacks on British soil have been steadily increasing over the past few months. Another stated before the man next to him nodded, "We can't keep this silent for much longer. And there are limits to the information that we can suppress," a short gentleman added. "What is going on, Sir Integra?" "We have been conducting a thorough investigation into the matter," she started, lowering her hands and reaching into her inside coat pocket, "and finally, we have come into contact with our first solid piece of evidence." She held up a small chip, not bigger than her thumb. "And what is that supposed to be?" one at the end questioned. "A transmitter, perhaps much more. We've been finding these chips embedded inside the vampires we've killed. These chips seem to relay information on the creature's physical and mental state, movements and altercations. Good God! These attacks are not random," she continued, ignoring the outburst and shocked gasps. "There's someone creating these vampires, controlling them, moving towards some unknown purpose." She pulled out a cigar and held it preparing to light it, "And that's not all, it gets much worse." "What? Please. Go on." "These are different," she started, stopping just long enough. "Traditionally, ghouls come from the corpses of deflowered men and women once they've been drained of blood by a vampire. But not anymore. During these incidents, not one new vampire has been created. Young boys and girls, clearly virgins, have been turned into ghouls instead of vampires. Also, the traditional ghouls do not survive the killing of their host. These do." "Walter." Sarah's ground out as her eye twitched madly, looking at the man as they stood in her room in the dungeon of Hellsing Manor. "What the hell is this thing?" Looking down at a small coffin, Walter looked back up to her without a trace of emotion. "That is a coffin." She slid over to him, eyes narrowed and fists clenched. "I know." She huffed in an annoyed yet angry tone. "Why is there a coffin in my room?" "Oh," he exclaimed, "it's here on orders of Sir Integra. We can't have a vampire that doesn't sleep in a coffin. So there you are." She leaned in closer, her dangerous glint not bothering him at all. "What did you do with my bed?" "I had it disposed of, Walter." He never even flinched as she foamed at the mouth, glaring at him. "If it helps, the orders were confirmed by Alucard." Master?" she squeaked, now looking down with a small blush on her face. He nodded. "Yes, since you are still refusing to drink blood like a proper vampire, you must now sleep in a coffin filled with the soil of your birthplace. This smallest of concessions are needed to keep up your strength. I take it that you're uncomfortable with the situation." "You're an idiot," Alucard spoke, walking into the doorway and looking in. Sarah's looked up to him with a blush, embarrassed by that. "You chose the night," he continued after a moment. "Once you turn your back on the light of day, all the sunlight should mean to you is smoldering pain and a slow death." Walter turned around and moved to a metal case he had on a table. "Good evening, Alucard. I have something very special I was hoping to show you." Lucifer roared in as he attacked his traitorous son, swiping at him with brutal-looking claws. Naruto ducked and dodged the blunt of most attacks, getting a few small cuts and wounds here and there but nothing too damaging. Seeing an opening in the devil's attacks, Naruto lashed out with a claw swipe of his own followed by a roundhouse kick that sent Lucifer staggering back. "You've learned well, boy," Lucifer hissed out as he held his bleeding face. "Seems that you weren't a complete failure. You created me in your image, fitting that I would be seen as such." Naruto shot back, still at the ready. The blonde then tensed up as Lucifer chuckled, the devil's powers increasing as a pair of leathery bat-like wings burst from his back. The devil smirked at the boy. "Your wit never fails, but let's see how you do against me at full power." His smirk faltered though as Naruto's own wings appeared. "Those wings?" Lucifer hissed out, eyes flashing in rage. "I should have known." Naruto's eyes snapped open, ceasing his dreaming as he felt two presences approaching the mansion while hundreds of others seemed to wait further away. Suddenly, there was a faint sound of gunfire, causing him to sit up and frown as the only electronic device in his room, a clock that was plugged into a socket, started to cut off and on, resetting the time back to 12 as it flickered. "Who in their right mind would attack us?" he mused to himself while getting dressed, pulling on his pants and belt, sliding on his boots before grabbing his pistol and shotgun. Holstering his weapons, he felt the hundreds of other presences approach and soon he knew they were ghouls. "Vampires, huh?" he mused to himself, popping his neck and smirking. "This might be interesting." With that he vanished. As the lights started fluctuating in the meeting room, Integra looked up in wonder while the already tense men got a bit frightened. Suddenly, the phone on the desk buzzed. "Sir Integra, this is Control Room 1, we are under attack, it's an unknown enemy." The man over the line yelled, gunfire filtering through to them. "We are currently engaging them at the front entrance. Hold the line, let nothing through and buy as much time as you can," she ordered. "Yes ma'am," but as soon as he said that, he started screaming. "Officer," she yelled at the intercom, "I need details." A loud boom echoed over the line followed by silence. "My master." Integra's eyes widened a bit as she recognized Naruto's voice. "Naruto, report, what's happening out there?" Naruto stood in a concrete bunker-like building that served as a command post, looking around at the carnage. Bodies of both ghouls and Hellsing soldiers were strewn around as he held his shotgun in hand, the barrel glowing while a large 5-foot hole was blasted straight through the wall. "We are under attack," he told her while holding the phone to his ear. "2 vampires and an army of armed ghouls. Some have already slipped past the checkpoints, so I recommend that you get to safety." "What in God's name was that explosion?" she demanded, worried that the ghouls were armed with explosives. Such a force was already a problem, but if they were armed with bombs then Hellsing was in deep trouble. "Forgive me my master," he chuckled, "but I was forced to unleash a bit of my power into my gun. I honestly wasn't expecting such a violent reaction. If you see Walter before I do, please give him my regards." "What are the status of my men there?" Naruto was silent for a moment. "I am sorry master, they stood no chance against such an overwhelming assault with little warning. Rest assured that the men who have fallen will not rise once more to bolster the ranks of our enemy." She looked down briefly, the loss of her soldiers tearing at her heart, but she quickly pushed the feeling away. "Master." The demonic blonde started after she didn't speak. "What are my orders?" While the question seemed stupid to ask, she knew what he meant. He wanted to know if she wanted him to continue to cut down the ghouls, aid her, hunt the vampires, or even try to help her men, who were having trouble against the ghouls armed with shields and submachine guns. The 11 old men looked at her expectantly, waiting to hear her issue the orders. Hey, is this bitch on?" A loud and obnoxious voice called over the intercom on the phone, which could act like a party line if need be but could be cut off at any time to talk to only a single line. "Hello. This message is going out to the round table conference, and a very personal and heartfelt shout out to the queen bitch herself, Ms. Hellsing. All right. Your ass is currently being kicked by the Valentine brothers. My name is Jan, sounds like Jun. Valentine, and I can't wait to meet you. Me and the boys are just finishing lunch and we'd like to thank you for providing all these tasty snacks. By tomorrow, Hellsing will be nothing but a pile of shit." As the man went on, Integra bit her lip until blood dripped down her chin. She had taken her cigar in hand moments before, but now it was a broken, crushed and unusable. "There's nowhere left to hide now," Jan called out. "I recommend pissing yourself, followed by praying to your impatient god." In anger, Integra cut call, leaving only Naruto on the line. She heard him exclaim in the command post, "I have a feeling that I know what you want, I'll be there so." He was cut off by an explosion that shook the manor. What was that? One of the men screamed in terror. "Master, it would appear that they have destroyed the helicopter on the roof," Naruto told her. "I can see it from here." Naruto. Integra spoke in a deadly cold voice, "Carry out your orders. Show them their place." Naruto practically shivered at her tone, not in fear but from finding it sexy. "Right away, master." Jan Valentine, a tall, thin and tan man with golden yellow eyes, dark hair, sat in Integra Hellsing's office, his feet up on the desk while smoking one of her cigars. "Man, this bitch is a snob," he called out while scratching his crotch. "Got these expensive ass cigars and shit while others ain't got nothing." He stood up, climbing his hands in the pockets of his purple pants while the ghouls he had with him stood dumbly. "A slow agonizing death is too good for that stick-up-her-ass bitch. I think it's time someone gave her an old-fashioned, working-class ass kickin'," he mused to himself. "Then I'll kill her. No, first I'm a skullfuck that bitch." Jan pushed through the group of ghouls and went to kick the door open, only for it to explode off its hinges and rocket into the ghouls next to him, sending them flying like rag dolls. "Skullfuck who? You little bitch." Jan looked at the person who had just blew the door open and called him a bitch. He didn't wear a shirt, showing his torso off while he wore some black combat pants and boots with 2 weapons and ammo on his belt. "Who the fuck are you?" he exclaimed indignantly, looking at the muscular blonde. All he got was a toothy smirk, showing a mouth of sharp teeth that seemed to outclass even ghouls and vampires. "What the hell's going on here?" one of the 11 men cried out fearfully, terrified at being under siege. Integra pushed up her glass and leaned forward. "They're closing in, and fast. They've taken the first 2 floors as well as the roof. Escape isn't possible." The same man as before, a large in size man wearing a blue suit with a mustache, pointed at Integra. "You go something, you're responsible for this." "Sir Penwood," snapped the eldest and most influential of the men, the one who had been sitting directly across from Integra. "This is neither the time nor place for such behavior. I believe what Sir Integra is trying to say is that we may have to fend for ourselves. Is that correct?" She nodded. "That is correct." Penwood sat down and laid his head on the table, holding it with his hands. "We're going to die," he whimpered. Above him, a ceiling tile shook loose and fell, hitting him in the head before another figure fell, landing right on his head while Walter followed suit, landing on his hands and flipping off the table. Integra's eyes lit up. "Sarah's." "Walter." "Forgive the delay, Sir Integra," Walter apologized as he brushed himself off lightly, "but crawling through the air ducts is a rather bothersome task. It's been ages since I've seen their layout." As he approached, she produced another cigar and he held out a lighter, lighting it for her. "The manor's defensive forces have roundly decimated. Those few that still live are defending the way here, ready to give their lives if need be." Walter continued while putting the lighter away. "I don't know who armed and trained these creatures, but whoever did it, a tactical genius. They knew exactly how and where to hit us." She let out a thick plume of smoke. "Walter, honestly, do you think we're done for?" He gave her a small, yet dark smirk. "No, of course not. Compared to the trouble Van Helsing centuries ago, I'd say that this hardly rates as a crisis," he told her before flexing his hands, causing them to pop and crack loudly. "The plan is as follows, Sir Integra. Alucard will intercept our attackers in the sublevels. Sarah's and I will clear out this floor. Naruto, on the other hand, well, I'm sure his actions will fall firmly into place with ours." Everyone excluding Walter and Integra flinched as a blood-chilling reached them, one that seemed to reverberate in their very souls. "Where you think you're going, little bitch?" Naruto chuckled hatefully as he appeared in front of Jan, who was now covered in bruises, burns, and other wounds. "I have yet to begin your torture." Jan tried to jump away, to escape the monster before him, but it never let him. It toyed with him. A hand inked his throat before he was lifted off of the ground and brought face to face with the blonde. Naruto's third eye opened up, the demonic orb twitching and gazing around wildly before locking onto Jan, causing both his and the eye to dilate. "Signed, Lord Tibby victims," he hiss out, causing a small spike in power to be released from his extra eye. Jan's eyes rolled back as he began to convulse, sucking at air as hard as he could before releasing an earth-shaking scream. Naruto released him and laughed. watching the man shake uncontrollably under his power. What he had used was a repentance curse, which literally meant, suffer the pain of thine victims, causing them to feel every bit of pain they've ever knowingly caused. Turning away, he left Jan to suffer until his body gave out. Unless you could withstand the pain in its entirety, there was no way to stop the torture unless it was stopped by the one who cursed you. So he vanished, heading towards the lovely Integra Hellsing. Had he stayed, he would have seen Jan starting to move, but with his powers slightly drained, he wasn't as hypersensitive to close presences and auras at the moment like he normally was, something that was the bane of Alucard in most of their sparring matches. My word! Walter exclaimed as the scream died out, seemingly as quick as it had started, but despite it how short the scream was, the damage had been done. What on earth was that? Sir Irons questioned, his usual unshakable voice showing just a bit of fear which went unnoticed. That was the tortured scream of a beast paying penitence, a new voice mused out coolly. From behind Sir Hugh Irons' hijack chair at the foot of the table, Naruto stepped out as if he had been there all along, freaking out Penwood even more. Naruto, Integra spoke as she saw him, now completely reassured by his presence. Report. Naruto slowly made his way closer, all eyes on him. The one known as Jan has been incapacitated. His death is assured to be a long and painful trip to hell. So the creature's dead? He started to nod but froze midway, making her tense up. What is this? He muttered darkly while drawing his .45 pistol and aiming it at the door, much to their confusion. But before anyone could question him, the double doors to the conference room were thrown open, revealing the injured form of Jan Valentine, who was smirking. Ready to die, bitches. The vampire trailed off at the sight of the blonde monster aiming a gun at him, the metal glowing slightly. Oh fuck me. The gun went off, the hollow point slamming into his torso and exploding out of his back, splattering blood and organs all over the wall behind him. But not only that, the force of the bullet had been so great that the slide was blown off, ruining the gun. Naruto held the grip for a minute before dropping it and approaching the near-dead vampire. You survived my curse. How strange. He mused, mostly to himself but loud enough to be heard by all. To survive such a thing you must be one strong-willed creature. Or. He stopped for a moment and studied the vampire. You're still under its effects. Raising his foot, Naruto crushed Jan's hand, the sound of bones breaking filling the air. Only, Jan didn't make a sound, he didn't even flinch. I see. The pain center of your brain has been fried. Such a sinful creature. He then turned to Integra, who had stood up and was approaching him. Interrogation will do no good, master. Even if he survived this wound, he no longer feels anything, he is numb to the world. We must rely on Alucard to extract the information from the other vampire. Integra nodded slowly, glaring down at the broken form of the vampire at her feet. I see. Naruto, put this dog out of its misery and send it straight to hell. Yes, my master. Naruto pulled out his shotgun and reloaded a new round before aiming it at Jan's head, which exploded into a gory mess with a loud bang. This should not have happened, Integra hissed lowly as she stood in the cemetery just after the mass funeral where she buried nearly 80% of her men while their families, that is, if they had any, cried and mourned their loss. Nature itself seemed to agree, the rain pouring down as if crying for the loss of life. Naruto stood next to her, dressed in a suit while holding an umbrella over Integra, who was wearing a black dress with a veil over her face. I agree, my queen. These men died before their time, but their sacrifice will forever be remembrance of those who live. They died doing their jobs and defending what they believed in, the Hellsing objective to protect the innocent from supernatural threats. I believe that should they have the choice, they would make it all over again. She was silent. My queen. Naruto started softly, are you crying? So many of my men were killed, half turned into those monsters. Are you that unfeeling? Can't you understand what I feel? She growled at him. Naruto looked up at the cloudy sky. My emotions are not lost to me, merely buried under many years of pain. In all honesty, my dear, this is not the first nor worst loss of life I've witnessed. Many of which, I'm ashamed to say, were influenced by me. They fell into silence as they watched the funeral. Naruto, Integra asked after a minute, we will avenge these soldiers. He nodded slowly, that goes without saying, my queen. By the time it was over, the sun had set and it was late. Walking back to the car, where Walter held open the door for them before going to the front, which was separated by a pane of soundproof glass for meetings. Naruto? Yes. Integra was a bit hesitant and, dare he think, shy to speak. Will you hold me? Just for tonight? He looked at her and nodded without hesitation, if that is what you wish. As Naruto laid beside Integra Hellsing, her head buried in his chest, he wrapped his arms around her gently and held her, rubbing her back through the silk nightshirt she wore. It had been a few hours since they had returned, stopping only to have a late dinner before heading off in separate directions, not wanting anyone to see him enter her room. He had given her just enough time to prepare for bed and arrived out of nothingness, catching her in his arms and holding her close as she slowly began to break down. For all her strength, toughness, and cold facade, she was still human, still young. The Hellsing force had well over 200 soldiers on base, but now, close to 40 were still alive, and only because they weren't there or on leave at the time. It was late, real late. Luckily for Integra, she really didn't have to get up in the morning for any meetings, seeing as those 11 from the Round Table Conference were gentlemen and wouldn't do something as stupid as to call for a meeting so soon after this attack. Naruto. Integra whispered into his chest, her voice muffled a bit. Tell me, why did you pledge your loyalty to me? Alucard is bound by my family, by my ancestors' work, but you aren't. The question had been bugging her ever since he started working for her, but never pushed it. But now, she was afraid that he would leave one day and abandon her, or maybe even betray them. He looked down at her, only seeing the top of her pale blonde head before taking a slow breath. Long ago, I betrayed Lucifer, fought him, and ruined his plans of returning to this plane of existence and bringing forth 1,000 years of darkness. He told her softly, making her look up at him with red puffy eyes. I was to be his vessel into the world, dying so that he could take my body and rule. But to have the power necessary, he needed to train me. I was warned of this in a dream by one of the 6 archangels and given a deal. I could follow through with the plan and ultimately lose or rise up against my father and be given a chance to return to the realm of humans. He let out a small snort. I failed, of course. My power paled in comparison to Lucifer, but in my rebellion the Lord granted me power, resulting in my wings. Flashback. Those wings. Lucifer snarled as he glared at the blonde. I should have known that the angels would interfere with me, so what did they promise you, boy? Naruto snorted. I truly don't require a reward to rise up against the likes of you. No one tries to take over my body, not even you. Lucifer sneered. Foolish child. Do you honestly believe that you can stop me? It will take more than a little holy power to stop me. Lucifer vanished in a blur, attacking the blonde with unnatural speed. Knowledge filled the blonde's mind and he jumped back, flapping his new wings a bit to gain more air. Sancte Crucis. Holy Cross. He yelled out, causing a bright light to appear in the shape multiple small crosses. Lucifer slammed into the wall of lights and unleashed a roar of pain as he was thrown back. Flashback end. Out battle went on for days, but I still failed and was reduced to ash and cast into purgatory. But in my final moments I used the last bit of my holy power to seal the gates of hell, trapping my father and his demons. My ashes were scattered for years inside the vastness of purgatory. I was unable to think clearly, reform myself. I couldn't even remember my own name. But after a while, my ashes were gathered by the archangel Azrael and sealed within the stone casket on earth. I had failed in my quest to destroy Lucifer but completed my vow to stop him. But, in order for me to be allowed to roam upon the world, an enemy of my father must awaken me and I must aid them until death. Integra said nothing, and it was only then did Naruto notice that she was fast asleep, snuggling into his chest. He hummed softly and leaned forward to kiss her on the head. It's funny, he mused to himself. Looking at you now, I'd never suspect that you would be the commander of Hellsing. Walter hummed the British national anthem softly to himself as he walked into Sir Integra's room at noon. Seeing that she dealt mostly with creatures of the night, she sometimes didn't get to bed until late night or early morning and would have him wake her up at midday. While some would see this as the act of an immature child or teenager, those who knew her and what she did understood the reasons and would never hold it against her. Especially seeing as she could easily sleep for an hour then go to a meeting looking as if she had gotten a full 12 hours of sleep. Unable to see due to the lack of light with the thick window curtains closed and not wanting to piss her off with the intense lights from her ceiling, he masterfully traced his steps over to the window next to Integra's large emperor-sized bed as he always had in the past and threw them open. Good. Walter started as he turned to wake the head of the Hellsing organization, only to see her laying with Naruto, her head on his chest. He smiled, happy that she had finally decided to live a little instead of becoming a miserable and alone old shut-in. Turning, he pulled the curtains back closed, leaving them cracked slightly so that only a little bit of light would shine through before turning to walk out. Walter, he glanced towards the bed and saw Naruto looking at him, eyes cold as ice. Naruto fixed him with a look of warning. You saw nothing. The man only smirked. Oh please, I'm thrilled that she finally decided to share her bed, the Hellsing family retainer told him quietly as not to wake the woman. I'm just happy that it's you and not some fool looking to weasel his way into power. As long as we're clear, she does not want anyone else to know. Walter nodded. I'd imagine not, but anyway, have a pleasant rest. Naruto watched Walter leave, content in the fact that he would keep this to himself and not go spreading this knowledge around. So with the pair all alone, he pulled her closer, not minding that she was laying over his arm, as it put him in the perfect position to grab a handful of her small yet firm rear, making her sigh into his chest. He wouldn't take advantage of her. It would be far too easy to use the massacre as a way to get her to spread her legs. No, he wanted her to give herself to him of her own free will. It was much more of a challenge and much more pleasing when you had to work for it. But it didn't mean he wouldn't slip in a feel or two. Or 50 throughout the night. Just as I remembered, he thought to himself as he rubbed her bum, carefully as not to leave a mark on the flawless tanned skin, perfect as always. Hours later, Integra Hellsing had gotten out of bed and prepared herself for the massive amounts of paperwork she knew was waiting for her approval. After a light breakfast, despite the fact that it was past lunch and nearing dinner, she got dressed and went to her office where Walter had met her, carrying a large stack of papers while giving her this strange little smile. Ignoring the smile, she sat at her desk and began to go over the forms that he handed her, numerous papers concerning the men and women that were Kia, bills for the cleanup and repairs, and even a letter from the Queen herself whom expressed her deepest condolences. Walter, she started after nearly an hour of signing papers, deciding to stop for a minute to rest her hand while addressing another issue. How are things concerning our forces? He nodded. I hope you don't mind, Sir Integra, but I've taken the liberty of hiring professional mercenaries, he told her in his even subservient tone. Mercenaries, she repeated, as if the word was strange to say. Men motivated by a lust for money. Can we trust such soldiers? Normally I'd agree with you, but these men are proper mercenaries. As long as they have a contract and get their money on time, the wild geese will never break their word. I believe they just finished up a contract in a war zone, right, and should be arriving soon. They were interrupted by a rumbling that made the windows shake, making them both sigh. Integra stood up and looked out of her office window to see Naruto bounce across the manor grounds like a rock skipping across water while Alucard held out his new monster of a pistol. I have a feeling that they'll feel right at home, she muttered lowly. Fuck, Naruto muttered as he laid face down on the grass, a large hole in his chest. Pushing himself up, he glared up at Alucard, who smirked at him. I've been waiting to test this out against a worthy opponent, the vampire grinned as he held the beast of a pistol up. Explosive shells, nice huh? Naruto pushed himself up, the hole in his bare chest healing. You know, every gun you have seems to be overpowered and large. I'm starting to think that someone's overcompensating. Alucard blinked behind his glasses, only to be punched in the mouth and sent flying as Naruto appeared in a flash. The blonde then vanished again and again, appearing beside or in front of Alucard to hit him again before grabbing the vampire and throwing him into the water fountain that sat in the backyard of the mansion. All right now, enough playing around, the blonde called out as Alucard sat up, his clothing completely soaked. We're having visitors and as such, Integra doesn't want you there. You should have a little while to get ready. Don't want to be late now, do you? By the time the wild geese were gathered inside of the Hellsing Manor, the sun had set and Walter had them wait inside a large room with their equipment sitting around haphazardly while some sat on top or just stood around. They all wore tan uniforms as if they were about to go fight, and some looked less than pleased at being there. Captain, what the hell is this? One of the men questioned to a taller man sitting backwards on a chair. The captain wore a darker colored coat and had on a cowboy hat. His reddish-brown hair was long and braided, wrapping around his neck loosely while an eye patch covered one eye. I didn't sign up to be shadowing some rich asshole all day, another called out. My God, you people. The captain laughed as he leaned into the backrest. I can't really think of a better way to put this, so here it is. They're going to be paying us to kill monsters. They're going to be paying us to do what? Another questioned in a get real tone while a few snickered. It's true. A firm and serious woman stated as she entered the doorway. Integra studied the group of mercenaries, dressed in her dark blue suit with a red tie, while Naruto, dressed in his normal pants and boots, along with a white tank top, stood next to her with his arms crossed. She looked them all over once, causing one to even flinch back a bit. The enemies are immortal creatures that sustain themselves on mortal blood. Your job, gentlemen, are to fight these monsters with bullets, garlic, and holy water, put a stake through its heart, cut off its head, burn the corpse, scatter the ashes. For further instructions, consult Bram Stoker, she told them, finishing with a smirk that was mirrored by Naruto. That's just ridiculous, a bespectacled soldier sneered under his hat before the shorter blonde next to him raised his head. Everyone knows they don't exist. Then that means we have done our jobs. Integra mused out. For generations, the Hellsing organization has helped keep the world blissfully ignorant of vampires, werewolves, and demons. But for those of you that are still unconvinced, she smirked as she slowly pointed to the side, allow me to present to you a genuine vampire. Every head in the room whirled to the figure leaning against the wall. It was Sarah's. Blushing lightly at being the center of attention and giving a meek wave. Huh. Oh no. Pip, the captain and leader of the wild geese, exclaimed as he stood up and walked towards Sarah's. Just hold on. You are really a vampire? Yes, I am. Hello, she greeted shyly. He blinked before bursting out in laughter, followed by the rest of his men. She blinked and looked over to Integra and Naruto. I think they're laughing at me, sir. Integra, who had yet to move, only looking at her with her knowing smirk, shared a quick glance with the blonde man next to her before turning back to Sarah's, then show them something to make them stop laughing. Sarah's saluted. All right, sir, she said before rearing back, and flicking Pip in the face with her finger. The Mont's head snapped back from the force, blood spraying out of his nose before she flicked and poked him over and over again, knocking him off his feet and back to his soldiers, who had all stopped laughing and were staring in shock. And no way, Pip coughed out, shock all over his face. As was his own blood. She's really a monster. He then turned to Integra. So, all of this time vampires and werewolves exist. She nodded slowly, as have demons, witches, and a few others. Isn't that right, Naruto? The blonde nodded. Indeed, though only a few werewolves exist and witches are even rarer. We have made sure of that. A few of the soldiers helped their captain stand, who then looked at the blonde man and asked, so you're a vampire too? Integra chuckled. A rare sight to be seen. Of course not. Naruto is something different but nonetheless mythical and legendary, she told them while Naruto smirked and nodded. He is a monster straight from the pits of hell itself. It didn't take a genius to figure out that she was saying that he was a demon, making them back away in fear at his toothy grin. I don't believe it, Pip exclaimed in shock. You're really telling me that he's a demon and that girl is a vampire? Damn right they are, came the disembodied voice of Alucard as he slowly faded through the wall next to Integra, much to her annoyance. The police girl may be the lowest of the low, but a vampire is still a vampire. As is a demon like the one next to my master. The wild geese collectively gasped and stepped away again. What a pathetic bunch of sniveling cowards, Alucard chuckled as he fully exited the wall, addressing his master. Do you really think they'll be of any use to us? Integra heard running behind her and glanced back to see Walter running towards her. My deepest apologies, ma'am. He huffed as he stood behind her, glancing at Alucard. I tried to stop him. These men are going to be guarding me while I sleep. Alucard broke in, interrupting Walter and explaining his actions a bit. I wanted to take their measure. And from what I see, I expect more work by how jumpy these men are. At least with Hellsing's blue-eyed devil around, I won't have to bother too much and let him do the heavy lifting. Naruto shot Alucard a glare. You're just pissed that I nailed your coffin shut while you were still in it. He snipped, getting a glare in return. Walter then turned to Integra. Well then, NS are complete. He told her before holding out a letter. This came in the post for you today. She saw the wax seal on the back and her eyes widened then narrowed. Section 13. As Naruto followed his mistress or master, whichever sounded better, back down the halls after departing from the wild geese and toward her office, he couldn't help but wonder what the letter said. She had only glanced at it and seemed to memorize it instantly, gaining an annoyed yet angry look on her face. "Is something troubling you, my queen?" he asked, knowing that they were alone as the maids that worked to keep the place clean were off duty and Walter was busy with telling the wild geese where they were assigned to stay. Integra glanced back at him for a moment but kept on walking. "It's the Vatican, Special Operations Section 13. The Iscariot organization." He nodded. "Ah. Our so-called rivals. What? Have they sunk so low as to send you junk mail now?" "No. But I wouldn't put it past them. But that wanker Enrico Maxwell wants to meet me at the Art Museum here in London." "Oh. Well, am I invited?" "Naturally. After all, what better way to rub the fact that I have better subordinates in his face?" "Ah, my queen, you wound me. After all our time together, I think that you would see me as more than a trophy to show off," he mused in a mock-hurt tone. The next afternoon, Naruto was sitting across from Integra dressed in a more casual version of his usual clothing. He didn't have all the bullets and guns strapped around his waist and actually had on a shirt and cargo pants with his boots. In fact, he didn't have any of his weapons besides his unholy power and body. He looked at Integra and bit his lip, stifling a laugh much to her annoyance. "What is?" she snapped after seeing this for the third time. He looked at what she was wearing and held his breath. She wore a navy blue dress with a red puffy tie and had on the stupidest looking hat he had ever seen. One side seemed to go up straight up and the other went straight down, covering the side of her head. Well, finally it became too much for him and he laughed, explaining to her over his laughter that her hat was too much for him. Next thing he knew, he had an imprint of the Hellsing family ring in his forehead. "Sorry, my queen." He apologized as they stepped out, but he did notice one thing: she had left the hat behind. 3 hours later, Integra, Naruto, and Walter had all taken a walk around the museum, looking at all the old paintings while they waited, but soon were back at the meeting place with an annoyed feeling. Enrico was really late and Integra was starting to lose her patience. "Marvelous, simply wonderful. Just look as how well preserved these paintings are," a voice said, getting louder and louder as it approached. Naruto glanced over. There were two people. The first was dressed in a white long-sleeved shirt, a purple vest with matching purple pants and black shoes. He had long white hair pulled into a tight ponytail and a pair of oval-shaped glasses sat on his face. As any Roman Catholic would have it, he wore a wooden cross over his chest, hanging right over his heart. The next man was less notable. He was older and wore all black priestly clothing while carrying a black attaché case in hand. The man saw Integra standing there, looking at a painting, and looked to the older man. "Oh dear, it looks like we are a bit late." "It would appear so, sir." Enrico stepped forward. "Allow me to aplo." "That is close enough," Integra snapped, cutting the man off. "What business does the Vatican have here, and why send the Iscariots? The dirtiest of their dirty little secrets." "How unfortunate. It seems that our reputation had preceded us." The man started while taking off his glasses. "But allow me to extend my condolences for the loss of your men in Ireland," from Chapter 3. Integra turned to him, eyes blazing with anger. "It was your agent that killed them, and I barely escaped with my life. How dare you?" Enrico sneered. "Will you shut up?" he growled, the glasses in his hand shattering. "Two men? I wouldn't care if we slaughtered 2 million of you Protestant scum and never shed a tear. You really expect us to just let you do as you please? I'm here under direct order from His Holiness, so just shut up and pay attention, you miserable English sow." Naruto turned to face Enrico, face bare of any emotion. "So?" he repeated with a chuckle. "You Catholic dogs still use such words as an insult?" Enrico's eyes narrowed. "What did you say? I call you and every other pathetic person like you a dog. You do know what a dog is, right? Or has your kind become just as ignorant to education as it has to practicing what you preach? Come on, say it with me. Dog." Naruto mocked, stressing out the word, dog. The man's eyes darkened a bit but lit up as he recognized the blonde from Anderson's report. "Ah, you must be Hellsing's newest animal, come to defend its master." Naruto merely chuckled. "Once again you fail to form a proper insult, but yes, I am the newest addition to the Hellsing arsenal of supernatural weaponry." "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you ignorant dogs aren't used to hearing such big words, but the point is that I insulted you." "Yes, you are defiantly the beast from Anderson's report." Enrico deadpanned. "I must say though, I've never truly met a real demon before, much less the son of Lucifer." Naruto snorted. That is because most demons cannot stand to lower themselves to speaking with such lowly animals such as you. And yet you serve a human master. I never said anything about humans, I was talking about Catholics. Those that hold on to the past and refuse to see the world for what it is. Naruto, that'll be enough. Integra told him after a moment, cutting Enrico off before he could retort. As interesting as it would be to watch you rip this pig limb from limb, I don't feel like dealing with the cleanup. Enrico chuckled. You think I'm alone? He questioned before looking up and screaming out. Anderson. Well, Naruto chuckled as he saw Anderson walking down the long hallway behind Enrico. If it isn't the Judas priest, the Vatican's pet regenerator. He mused while popping the bones in his neck. I'd say it's nice to see you again, but unlike the arrogant pig before me, I shall not lie and wear such a facade and act as if we're friends. Son of the Dark One, abomination of hell, you do not belong in this world. Humanity ill needs a monster such as you to bring upon the curse of darkness. Anderson called out while holding his weapons of choice in hand. Naruto smirked. I must agree, humanity in general are dark and sinful beings. They do no need demons or monsters to make them sin. When they sin, it speaks of human nature. He snipped while Anderson approached, a wild glint in his eyes. Enrico saw Anderson's look and stepped in front of him, his arms raised in a blocking motion. Anderson, stop. But Alexander Anderson pushed past him, never slowing down while holding his bayonets in hand. In the name of God, impure souls of the living dead and creatures of hell shall be banished to eternal damnation, he continued to chant under his breath. Naruto stepped forward, his blue eyes changing to his devilish unholy crimson while his fingernails started to grow, sharpening into blackish points. You priests never cease to amuse me. I've beaten you once, foolish man, and can easily do so once more. In a flash, Anderson slung something from his sleeve that impacted with Naruto's hand as he caught it, causing the object to shatter and splatter water on his arm and legs. Steam appeared on his exposed skin, but Naruto didn't react. He only released the broken shards of glass and let them fall to the floor. Holy water? He deadpanned with a raised eyebrow. Did you really just throw holy water on me? Anderson smirked, seeing that the water was doing its work as the demon's hand and arm turned red from the blessed water. Hurts, doesn't it, foul monster? Naruto hummed. Holy water is nothing but an irritation to me, he mused while showing that it was quickly turning back to its normal skin color. But I do congratulate you on such an underhanded attack. The demon vanished from sight in the blink of an eye and backhanded Anderson, leaving 4 long gashes across the priest's face before the man was thrown into a wall. Your master asked for a meeting here with my own master, you lowly insect, and yet you attack me like a rabid dog. If this were any other place, then I would gladly shove that cross you wear down your throat and choke you to death. But seeing as we are in a rather public place, I'll just wait until we met again. Naruto sneered before smirking. I know we will. After all, you fools just love to try and push your authority on others. After all, you refuse to learn from history, so you're doomed to repeat it. Naruto then turned to look at Enrico, who put up his hands nervously. You should keep your animals on a tighter leash, but then again, maybe you're unable to. His disregard for your orders clearly show how well you command your forces. Integra smirked inwardly as Naruto made a fool out of the Section 13 leader while keeping a straight face. But seeing as she had waited 3 hours, she wanted to know what Enrico had to say. Naruto, that will be enough, she spoke evenly, almost unheard over Naruto's insults. He turned to her and nodded before stepping away and taking his place behind her and next to Walter. Now, are you done, pig? The woman questioned harshly to Enrico, who nodded quickly. Yes. Quite. So, now that that is out of the way, would you care to join me in the museum cafe? Enrico asked, trying to seem polite and ignoring Anderson, who only twitched on the floor, unconscious from hitting his head on the wall. Fine. Naruto, Walter, and the unnamed priest watched the pair walk away as if they had been friends. Walter and the other man sighed, relieved that there wasn't any more violence that would end up with both organizations having to pay for the damages. Naruto, on the other hand, glanced over to Anderson and smirked. As Integra sat across from Enrico, forced to listen to him brag about knowing information that she wanted, she suddenly got this feeling that listening to Enrico was well worth what was to come. I cannot believe that you'd do such a thing, Walter said while the 3 of them looked down at the unconscious paladin. Naruto glanced to Walter, then back down to Alexander, who laid on the ground in nothing but his underwear with writing all over him in marker. Things like, "Enrico was here," with an arrow pointing down at his ass, "I like it rough," and "Section XII's bitch," covered his back while Anderson's face was covered in funny drawings. "What?" he defended, "this is an art museum, I just thought that I'd submit some art of my own," Naruto said with a grin before frowning, "although, I could have used a better model." Enrico's assistant stifled a chuckle, causing the other two to look at him. "What? He may be one of us but he is an ass." Naruto's eyebrow raised. "I would have thought that you would defend your fellow priest, you know, love thine brother and all." The man hummed, "The good Lord said to love and honor thine brother." He never said anything about liking them, he told them while crossing his arms. The blonde demon smirked and looked to Walter. "I like this one," he mused before turning away. "Seems that not all Catholics are so bad. Now, if you will excuse me, I'm going to go look at the art around here. I never did get to see the late 18th century gallery." Walter blinked. "But that's been closed off," Naruto chuckled. "I know, but you never quite get to appreciate art with others around you. Screaming children, elderly tour groups. Luckily today was a slow day." Night had fallen, the full moon hanging high in the sky and lighting up the manor in its pale light. Naruto stood on the rooftop helipad looking up at the blue moon, moonlight shining on his bare torso. "Good evening, Sarah's," he greeted out of the blue, surprising the girl who had just walked out from the stairs, not making a sound as she walked. "Do you wish to share what's on your mind tonight? Or do you just wish to follow me around for a bit?" The demon didn't even have to see her to know that she was now blushing, embarrassed at being caught and called out. "So, you've known all along?" she nearly squeaked out, finding it much tougher to talk to him than Alucard, but then again, Alucard was her master and she had much more contact with the no-life king than with the blue-eyed devil. Naruto chuckled a bit. "Fledgling, you are far too young and inexperienced to sneak up on me, even your sire cannot hide his presence from me. But you came to me for a reason, young Draculina, speak up. I will not bite." The fledgling vampire took a breath. Well," she started before losing her nerve, "I just wanted to ask, why did you come up here?" Naruto looked away from the moon and turned to her. "The moon. It's pale as death, but that is not what you wanted to ask me. Clearly it's something that Alucard would mock you for asking or give you some vague answer just to confuse you. So, tell me what you really wish to ask." "Well," she bit her lip, wincing as her sharp fangs cut her lip a bit, "it's kind of embarrassing to ask but could I still fall in love and have a family?" Sarah's expected to hear a mocking laugh but was surprised to get a thoughtful hum instead. Naruto crossed his arms as he thought about it. In truth, he hadn't expected for her to ask that. Maybe something like a cure for vampirism, but not if she could still love and have children. "Sarah's, just because your heart stops does not mean that you no longer have one. You may fall in and out of love just as you could when you were human. But most learn early on that the life of a vampire is a solitary and lonely existence," he told her with a small sigh, looking over at the new helicopter that had been bought to replace the destroyed one, only to see a crow land on the rotor. "As for giving birth to children, well, most vampires can only give birth symbolically through turning others, but there is a slight possibility that you may be impregnated by a mortal man. The chances are slim, but if you do, you will give birth to a dhampir." The crow cawed loudly, distracting him and making him frown. "Sarah's, I believe that you and Alucard will be going on a mission soon. Why don't you go and prepare?" he told her after a second, still looking at the crow, much to her confusion. But she did as he suggested and left him there alone on the roof. Or so she thought. Once her presence got far enough away, he closed his eyes and put on an annoyed frown. "Really now, first the moon and now the crow. If you weren't obvious enough the first time, then you were clearly losing your edge." A cold feeling enveloped him, chilling him to the core and making him feel as if his blood had tiny ice sickles flowing through his veins. "I had to make sure you got rid of the girl," a cool and refined, yet still a little raspy, voice said out of nowhere, "though it is nice to see you free once more, Mr. Uzumaki." Naruto turned and saw a thin, bony man wearing a black suit standing behind him with his back to the moon. In his hand was a black cane with a silver handle that matched the ring on his right hand, silver but with a white stone on top. The man's face seemed unnaturally gaunt, like a skull with skin stretched over it. He had long black hair and a receding hairline, but nothing compared to his eyes, pricing gray that seemed to know every corner of your soul. It's been a long time, the person stated, far too long. Naruto looked around a bit, never taking his eyes completely off the man. Indeed it has, but back then, you were plotting to find a way to take my soul. The man smirked. Well, we all dream of what we cannot have, but all of that is behind me now. So you come here to tell me that you've given up on taking my soul? The blonde questioned in an unconvinced tone. The man didn't crack a smile. Given up? Of course not. Your time will come not to tell you that but to thank you. Naruto's eyes raised. Thank me? He repeated, is the world ending or something? It has to be for the fourth horseman to say thanks towards any being. So tell me, what did I do to gain the gratitude of death? Death looked unamused. When you gave up your holy power to seal your father inside his own domain, you've made my work much easier. He may have not been able to have a physical manifestation here on Earth, but he was still able to spread some of his influence. The Fourth Shinobi War and genocide was proof of that. If you've come to give me a history lesson on my father's past acts, then save it. I know full well what he has done. What I've done. A history lesson would be pointless, but unlike him, you've paid for your sins tenfold. Your wings are a mark of that. My wings are the mark of a fallen angel, a mere consolation for sealing Lucifer away but failing to end him, Naruto retorted. Death edged his head to the side. Even the fallen may rise back up. You are proof of that. You've committed the most grievous of sins, selling your soul and forsaking God. Yet, you've snatched it from Lucifer's grasp, forsaken the devil, and sacrificed yourself to seal him away. The blonde snorted. I did it out of spite. Death shook his head. For one so knowledgeable of the true ways of God, you still have much to learn. He told Naruto before reaching into his coat, we have been watching you, Mr. Uzumaki, thinking of ways to aid you in your journey without interfering too much. The Lord has asked that I give you this. Death presented an object covered in a fine black silk cloth. This may not seem like much, but it will not explode under the strain of your powers, and in time, you will understand why this was given to you. But in the meantime, enjoy your vacation, while it lasts. Naruto blinked. What does that mean? He asked while taking the object and removing the cloth to reveal an old-fashioned single-action army that fired 45 rounds. The metal was a shiny silver but much heavier than normal, telling him that it wasn't steel with a chrome finish, but solid silver. Symbols covered the cylinder, symbols that were actually the language of the angels, blessing the weapon to withstand his power. The handle was made of pearl and matched perfectly with the image of an angel-made weapon. A struggle will befall upon you soon. A great darkness will consume the land under a symbol of old. Having been briefed on everything from Integra, Naruto knew what he was talking about, the Nazis. Death didn't reply. When he looked up to see why, he saw that he was alone. Wow. From the other end, that's kind of annoying. You seem troubled, my queen, I can see it clearly. Integra barely twitched at the blonde man's sudden appearance, having fallen victim to it many times in the past. But still she found it annoying. Even Alucard's entrance seemed to make the room feel cold. But Naruto, you never knew until he wanted you to. What? She snapped irritably. My aura telling you that? Naruto was silent for a moment before he answered, no, actually. You're starting to get stress lines. I wasn't joking when I told you that I could see it clearly. I'm busy. I need to get this work finished, she growled while filling out paperwork. What you need is to get laid, he chuckled, only to have a paperweight bounce off his forehead. No need to get violent, my queen, I'm only pointing out the obvious. No, you're not, she stressed out while glaring, you're just trying to seduce me. He fixed her with an even stare. I'm hurt. I would never try and trick you into succumbing to the pleasures of the flesh. I told you before, my queen, that I would only share you bed or ravage your body when you ask. He then vanished and reappeared at the front of her desk. So I ask you again, is there anything you would like of me? She smirked. As a matter of fact, yes. I have something you can do. Early the next morning, Captain of the Wild Geese Pip Bernadotte sat on a private jet reading a newspaper on the way to South America. He glanced over to top and saw the smirking visage of Alucard sitting across from him, dressed in a black suit with a red shirt, round mirrored sunglasses over his eyes, and a black tie. The vampire's usual messy and disheveled hair was now smooth and flat, looking like fine silk against his pale white skin while he swirled a glass of blood-red wine. A vampire drinking wine on a private jet, flying to Rio de Janeiro in broad daylight. He mused to himself, bored. Having gotten over the fact that the man across from him was an insanely powerful monster of myth, the stories got everything wrong. He then thought about it for a second and looked back down to his paper. Well, maybe not everything. Thinking back, he almost felt bad for Sarah's, who was now locked inside of her coffin in the cargo hold. They hadn't told her that they were going. They only grabbed her coffin while she slept and strapped it shut before hauling her away. This is not exactly what I had in mind, Naruto hummed to himself as he slammed his clawed fingers through the chest of an actual vampire, not one of the artificial filth that the Nazis had been making. Hellsing's resources were a bit thin these days, and now he was stuck picking up some of the slack. They had been tracking this coven for a while now, but before they could act on it, the Valentine brothers had attacked, forcing them to put the vampire eradication on the back burner for a while. The vampire let out a dying cough, blood spraying from its mouth before being reduced to ash. This coven had been luring young men and women in, acting as a gothic club where sex was a sure thing, only it wasn't a happy ending they got. They were bitten and drained of blood. They were smart too, had some lookouts to watch for trouble, but they were weak, nothing like Alucard. Entering the club, wearing his normal combat clothing only without his weapons belt and wearing a leather jacket over his bare torso, he was greeted by the sounds of gothic music and the smell of arousal, blood, booze, and death. "Haven't seen you around before," a pale-faced, bald man hissed out as he spotted the blonde. "Were you invited?" Naruto glanced around, noting that they were standing in a small area between the club and outside before looking at him. "I was not aware that one needed such a thing," he replied coolly, eyes flashing red while his sharpened teeth were seen. "Ah, you're one of our kind," the man smirked only for the blonde to vanish. "What the?" he jerked suddenly, eyes dimming as blood poured from his mouth. Naruto sneered at the vampire as he stood behind him. "One of your kind?" he said as if disgusted while twisting the blade deeper. "You are trash, nothing like a true vampire and certainly not like me." Removing the blade, he stabbed the blade into the vampire's skull, reducing it to ash. "This is almost a waste of my power," he huffed in annoyance before closing his eyes. When they snapped open, everything burst into flames. The entire building caught fire within seconds, windows exploding due to the sudden and drastic change in temperature. Every vampire, soon to be ghoul, and human was dead within moments, all reduced to ash from the unholy flames of hell. Naruto left the building and appeared on the roof of an adjacent building, watching as the building burned down before the emergency workers could even leave their stations. By the time they had gotten there, the building had collapsed into itself and the firefighters scrambled to save the buildings next to it, but oddly enough, they weren't bothered in the least, not even the brick walls were scorched. "When she said that she had something for me to do, I was hoping that she meant herself," Naruto muttered sadly to himself. "If I were any other monster, I'd have the worst case of blue balls right now." Integra stopped what she was doing and looked around. "Strange. I got this strange feeling like something is going to happen to me," she thought to herself before opening her desk drawer and pulling out on her thigh before going back to work. When Naruto returned to the mansion after hunting down a few more rouge vampires and smaller covens, the sun had already risen, greeting him with its bright rays of warmth. Walking down the long stone path towards the manor, deciding to enjoy the morning for once, he took note of the soldiers that were around. It was blatantly obvious as to which were the original Hellsing soldiers. They all moved with dignity and honor, believing in the Hellsing mission of protecting the United Kingdom from supernatural threats. The guards that stood vigilant, patrolling the grounds like hawks, were actual soldiers worthy to belong within Hellsing. The others, though, while respectable in their regard to keeping their word, the wild geese were mercenaries. They carried themselves as if nothing would happen, joking around as they patrolled and not giving their all when training. Although, that could be because their captain wasn't there with them to keep them in line. He wouldn't be putting much stock in these men. They were more like cannon fodder than anything. One Hellsing soldier was worth 2 or 3 of these greed-driven men. But the main way he could tell them apart was how they acted near him. Those of Hellsing had grown to revere and accept him as a part of Hellsing, while the wild geese were nervous and frightened of him. One had even fainted when he suddenly appeared out of thin air next to him. Upon reaching the door, he decided to forego the entrance and went straight to Integra's office, where he felt her presence. 4 covens and 7 pathetic vampires? My queen, are your expectations of me as such a low level? The blonde questioned as he appeared inside her office, only to have his head snap back as a bullet from her pistol pierced his forehead, spraying blood out of the exit wound. His body fell back with a heavy thump, blood pooling around his head as he didn't move. Integra put the Hun down and went back to her work. Get up, I know that didn't bother you. Like a zombie rising from the grave, Naruto stood up, the wound closing up while the blood boiled away. It is annoying, he mused while back on his feet, makes it hard to think straight. Naruto then gave a devious smirk, but then again, when I'm with you it's always hard to concentrate on anything besides you. She shot him again, but despite the quickly healing wound in his chest, he saw the blush on her face. Stop speaking such nonsense and get ready. I have an appointment with Her Majesty the Queen and as such, you will be my bodyguard. She stopped when she saw the look on his face, and if you dare say anything that even remotely sounds like innuendo, I'll shoot you with one of my incendiary rounds and burn what makes you a man. Naruto's dark chuckle echoed through her mind. As you wish, my queen. But do you wish for me to come armed or not? Bring your weapon, that pig Enrico will be there with some of his people along with the rest of the round table. He nodded. I will await your call, Naruto. He stopped and looked at her. Wear something befitting of your place. And what, pray tell, is my place? He questioned with a grin, which she copied. Your place is wherever I say it is. But as of now, your place is with me, right by my side. The meanings of what she said wasn't lost to him. It was her way of saying, I care for you, without having to admit it openly. The only question left was whether or not the woman had trouble admitting it to him, or herself. I wouldn't have it any other way, my queen. She had neglected to inform him that the meeting wasn't until that night. If it was on purpose or not, he didn't know. So by the time they were going, he had found that it was already late and had wasted the day away. You look respectable, Integra noted as she sat in her seat of the Hellsing limo, much better than your normal clothing. Or lack of. Hard to believe that someone who normally looks like one of those overly muscular movie heroes from America could look like this. He wore a midnight black three-piece suit with a blood-red shirt underneath with a black tie. A small sliver chain hooked to one of the buttons of his vest and went inside a small pocket where a small sliver watch sat, while under the jacket was his new revolver holstered over his vest but hidden under his arm and coat. He also had a long overcoat that matched his clothing and looked more like a lord of England than the servant of Hellsing. Another surprise was that he had a small pin in his collar in the shape of the Hellsing family coat of arms, something that only Walter would wear every now and then to show that he worked for her. Lastly, on his finger was a ring that she had never seen him wear before. The band was silver, no shinier than silver and seemingly flawless. It got wider and thicker at the top, housing a smooth white stone that seemed to be whiter than snow. Keep telling yourself that, my queen, Naruto snipped, fixing and smoothing out his tie while giving her an even stare, but we both know that I don't wear a shirt only because you like to look at my body. She blushed but didn't deny it right away. Anyway, she continued, wearing a black suit with a red ascot with her normal silver cross around her throat, be respectful when you are here. Yes, there will be people from the Vatican, and yes, everyone there knows about Alucard and you. Although to a lesser extent. I expect you to treat the queen with the utmost respect. No barbs against the Vatican, no attacking anyone without my approval, no demon magic, curses. Are you even listening to me? He huffed, looking out the window. Ever since she listing off these rules. Yes, my queen, I'm listening. I'm to stand by your side like an ever-vigilant hound, watching his master and awaiting the orders to tear one's face off. That is correct. His head shot around. Wait, you mean I was right? I was just guessing. Integra closed her eyes and counted to 10 in her mind, holding herself back from attacking him while they were so close to the place where the meeting was. Look, she stressed out through clenched teeth, when we arrive, the queen will more than likely wish to speak with you. You will approach her, kneel, and answer her questions truthfully. He nodded slowly. Do not worry, my queen. I will treat my queen's queen with all the respect you say she deserves. They fell into silence and soon stopped at the Parliament building, where they were greeted and led by funny-looking guards towards one of the meeting rooms. Inside was a long table in the center of a lowered platform. Each side had white and gold posts close to the wall, while the far side of the room sat a throne. The table had 13 seats. One sat alone on the left, another sat at the head, back towards the throne, and the other 11 lined the opposite side on the right. Sitting in the throne was an elderly woman with her hair in an elegant style. She wore a pinkish white dress and had a kind little smile on her face as she saw Integra walk in. The 11 others from the round table conference took up the chairs on the right, watching them as the three of them, Walter included, walked around them and towards the Queen of England. In the lone chair across from the 11, though, was Enrico, giving them a frown while his assistant held some papers and another younger-looking priest with wild pale blonde hair watched them from behind his glasses. "Your Majesty," Integra greeted, giving the elderly woman a bow. "Sir Integra Hellsing, I'm delighted to see you again," the Queen replied with her kind smile. Integra rose up. "Your Majesty, allow me to introduce Naruto Uzumaki, my newest servant." "Ah!" the woman exclaimed, studying the blonde male. "I've heard much about you, demon," she said, not sounding as if she meant to insult him by using the word demon over his name, "but your name is quite strange." Naruto knelt down and bowed, just as Integra had done. "'Tis the name my mother gave me. It is in her honor that I still use it." "Mother?" the Queen repeated. "Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I was under the mermaid." "'Tis a common misconception, Your Majesty, but I was not always what you see before you this day. I was once human, but the ignorance of mankind destroyed my humanity and my new father created me from the ashes." "Your father? Oh, forgive me. I was under the impression that you already knew. My father is Lucifer, the devil himself." The silence was deafening. One could nearly hear the staff having sex in the room on the other side of the building. "Lucifer, you say?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but I have long since forsaken him and now work to destroy his very existence in hopes of truly repenting for my darkest of sins." "And what sin is that?" she questioned, asking what was on the minds of everyone there. Naruto slowly looked up to her. "I was murdered as a child, tortured by the followers of God for simply being alive. My greatest sin was out of spite. I denied God and sold my soul for vengeance. Now I wish to rectify that by destroying the Lord's greatest enemy." With Naruto openly telling the Queen of his tortured childhood, he had no doubt touched her heart with his tale, which was proven by the small look of pity she gave him. The others at the meeting, however, didn't exactly show the same reactions. Enrico figured him to be lying in hopes of tricking the Queen, while the others really didn't care too much either way. "Rise, demon," she told his kneeling form, allowing him to stand. "I am honored to have one such as you to aid in the defense of Britain." He did as she said and stood straight just as he had seen his master do before him while she continued to speak. "Now, take your place beside Sir Integra and let this meeting begin." Integra took the chair at the head of the table which faced the doors but not the Queen, an old tradition that meant that she was ready to use her own body to protect the Queen if need be, while her servants, Naruto and Walter, stood motionlessly on each side. The meeting was rather boring. Reports of attacks, plans to handle the Nazi threat. The list went on, but it wasn't until the meeting was nearly over did things heat up just a bit. The door to the room swung open, the heavy wooden obstruction hitting the walls with a loud boom to reveal a smirking vampire in all red by the name of Alucard, followed by his fledgling and the Frenchman mercenary captain. The sudden entrance and loud boom had startled most of the men there. It even made the Queen twitch a bit, but the glowing red-orange eyes through Alucard's sunglasses seemed to calm her. "I have returned to you, my master," Alucard spoke as he took a step inside, Sarah's and Pip hot on his heels. Integra took her favorite sitting position, elbows on the table and fingers interlaced. "Well executed, my servant. The Queen awaits you," she told him before wagging her finger. "Now remove your glasses." He did as he was told and walked around the table, ignoring the dark look Enrico gave him as his two followers stopped a few feet from the foot of the table. Everyone else turned to watch as he passed them, getting closer and closer to the Queen before two suited guards stepped in his way, trying to wordlessly say that he was close enough. But he glared at them and both were blown back by an unseen force, sending them to the ground and allowing him to continue past. He walked up the steps towards the silent Queen and stopped with just a foot of space between them, his body towering over her own. "It's been a very long time, vampire," she spoke after a moment, breaking the tense silence of the room. "Come closer, let me look at you." Wordlessly, Alucard knelt down on one knee and gave her a half grin as she reached out and held his face. "All these years and you haven't aged a day, Alucard," she spoke as her hands held his cheeks. "Unfortunately, time's march has not been so kind to me. Can you believe how quickly I've become an old woman? I still see the spirited young woman I met 50 years ago, he told her without blinking. "In fact, to my eyes, time has made you even more beautiful, Your Highness." She smiled, laughing lightly. "Proceed with your report, vampire." Alucard nodded and stood up before turning to the others, his wild black hair covering his right eye. 55 years ago, A deranged Nazi major attempted to breed a vampire army. He started while walking down the steps. Walter and I laid waste to their entire operation. However, it seems that they simply refused to die. They've returned, replenished their numbers and are ready to complete their original mission. That is what Millennium truly is, the last battalion. The 11 others mumbled to themselves at the news. Naruto on the other hand suddenly drew his saw revolver, drawing everyone's attention to himself as he aimed at the door, which was now closed somehow without anyone noticing. Naruto, Integra started with a glare. Explain yourself. Naruto glared at a certain spot. We have a visitor, master. Oh, I see that I've been found out, called a child's voice from the foot of the table, where a young boy was now standing, shocking everyone. He had sandy blonde hair, a pair of brown cat ears on top of his head, and the strangest set of pink eyes, while he wore a Hitler Youth uniform consisting of a yellow shirt and blue shorts. In an instant, he had not only Naruto's revolver aimed at him, but the younger priest drew a pair of custom pistols while Pip got his own and aimed from the hip. Whoa there, the boy said with his German accent as he held up his hands. I'm just the messenger, I'm not here to fight anyone. Integra stood straight. Explain this, she demanded coldly to Walter, who had gone over the security. The man leaned forward. Forgive me, but I don't know how he got past. Naruto studied the boy before smirking. An artificial Neko, he chuckled while lowering the gun, and so similar too. His words had caught Integra's attention. Explain. He nodded. Of course, my master. A Neko is a cat demon, and this boy oddly resembles the former Neko queen of old. Had I not known better, I'd say he was her child. Naruto then looked at the boy with an analyzing glint in his eyes. Tell me, kitten, what does Neko Kaji no Nai mean to you? The Neko blinked. I don't know, he nodded. Just another pathetic imitation, Naruto hummed before looking to Integra. Neko Kaji no Nai is a power that all Neko are born with, the power to manipulate the dead like puppets, as well as start fires. But seeing as he doesn't know anything about them, he is not a true threat. The Neko's ears drooped. Now that was mean. Naruto fixed the boy with a glare. You are nothing more than a human experiment, a pale imitation of the Nebi no Nekomanda, one of the 9 demon lords of old and a former close friend of mine. He told him while never raising his voice. You are a disgrace to her memory and to her kind. Sarah's winced a bit. Wow, he was harsh, she thought to herself while glancing from Naruto to the younger boy. He's only a child. The Neko, still pouting, placed an object on the table. To the gathered representatives of the Vatican and Great Britain, he said with a downtrodden voice, allow me to introduce my commanding officer, the Major. He pulled out a remote and clicked it, and clicked it, and clicked it, only for nothing to happen. The Neko clicked over and over, tapping on the side before the screen finally popped on, revealing a blond man wearing a white suit. Hello, Major. Alucard started with a smirk, only for the Major to mirror it. Ah, Alucard, it is a pleasure to see you again. It's been far too long, he replied with his stupid little smirk. What do you want? Integra snapped, glaring icily at the screen and cutting off any remarks that Alucard was about to make. The Major hummed, Ah, Ms. Hellsing, finally we meet face to face. It's a pleasure to meet you. Enough of the pointless banter, what is it that you want? The Major chuckled, my purpose? What a silly question, my beautiful Fräulein. He stopped to let out a few snickers. You of all people should know that there are some irredeemable people in this world whom belies not require an end. The camera panned over to a tied-up Nazi officer surrounded by vampires before the Major snapped his fingers, unleashing them and giving the meeting a front-row seat to watch as the old Nazi officer was ripped apart by multiple vampire jaws. Out of the group, only Integra, Alucard, Naruto, and Enrico managed to keep a straight face at the horror. You're all insane, Enrico muttered. What? The Major hummed as the camera turned back to him. Did someone from the Iscariot questioning my sanity? Well, let me ask you something. If your god will allow my madness to fluorides across the globe, then wouldn't that mean that your god is just as mad as I? But no matter, you're not our true enemy. Our true enemy is Britain. The Hellsings. Or, to be exact, 2 people. The first being the one laughing in the corner, and lastly, the Aryan smirking next to the Fräulein. Everyone looked towards Alucard, who was laughing, then to Naruto, who stood next to Integra with a smirk on his face. A declaration of war? Excellent, I can't wait to destroy you once more. The Major only smirked. You may try, but we will keep getting up again and again. Integra sneered, "I've had enough, Naruto, Alucard, kill him." Naruto vanished, appearing next to the Neko boy and grabbing him by the neck with one hand and his pistol with the other. "When you get to hell, tell my father that I'll be coming for him sooner or later," he snarled while jamming the barrel in his mouth, knocking out a few teeth before his head exploded from the round going off in his mouth. "Fine, shoot the messenger, if that is what it comes to," the major laughed before Alucard shot the TV. But something caught their attention. The boy was gone, his once headless body was gone without a trace. "Sir Hellsing. Alucard. Naruto." The queen spoke out among the gasps of shock, causing the three to turn and look to her. Her face was serious and cold, her voice deadly and unwavering. "Destroy them. You have your orders." Later that night found Naruto and Alucard in Alucard's chamber of the subbasement or dungeon. The large room had nothing but a high-backed chair made over a few hundred years in the past, a small table that was just as old, a wineglass and a bottle of red wine. "I see you've been improving on your mental powers," the blonde observed with a large smirk as he stood across from the vampire sitting in his chair. "How long has it been since you've started trying to duplicate my own mental powers?" Alucard looked thoughtful while swirling a glass of wine in his hand. "I believe it has been 5 years. Ever since you shattered every bone in my body after throwing me aside like a discarded rag doll." "Ah yes. Just after my release from my prison." Naruto smirked, "What fun, but I have been meaning to ask you something for quite some time. Your fledgling, tell me, why did you turn her? You've watched numerous virgins coke on their own blood and yet, this one you decided to turn." Alucard removed his sunglasses and fiddled with them for a minute. "It wasn't my decision to turn her." "And yet, you couldn't keep your mouth off of her neck," the blonde snipped with a mocking grin. "Be that as it may, but tell me something. Have you met her family?" Naruto shook his head. "Her family is dead, killed in a home invasion. Father shot dead, mother was shot as she died." "Exactly," Alucard hummed. "Beneath that girlish exterior lies a truly fascinating and complex creature. A vampire that doesn't drink blood, what a travesty." "And yet, she is your fledgling," Naruto replied. "How amusing, the Draculina whom refuses to drink blood, sired by the one hailed as the Blood Lord. If that is not irony, then I do not know what is." The vampire chuckled, his laugh echoing off the stone around them. "Oh, she will drink, it is not a matter of if, but when. Her instincts will push her to drink, and when she does the girl will grow accustomed to it, sooner or later. And what if she goes for a fresh source?" Naruto mused. "Human blood is much better warm than cold and from a bag. What will you do when the girl becomes accustomed to human blood? Or even the blood of virgins?" That made the vampire's grin widen. "Then she will know the ecstasy which comes from the purest of liquids. She knows the rules laid forth by our master and will know true joy just long enough to never feel what ends her unlife. But tell me this, how would you know the taste of blood?" That made Naruto chuckle. "I have done many things, Alucard, many, many things. Consuming blood is just one of those things. But back to our previous topic. Why her? Abandoned to a town of death, her co-workers transformed into hungry, mocking visages of evil, a sadistic vampire hunting her down with the intention to and kill her. It was as close to hell as any mortal could imagine." He spoke while standing up, placing his sunglasses back on his face. "But what did she do? What fate did she choose? Giving up is what kills people. Those who refuse to give up are entitled to their time to trample upon the weak." He, Naruto exclaimed while turning around. "I cannot say that I am not surprised. Even for the king of vampires, you've always struck me as the type who'd believe in getting what one deserves. But I do agree, she is entitled to her time of power. Now if only she'd see it for herself." Sitting under a bright yellow umbrella, a pale woman dressed in dark purple suit with long violet hair and blue eyes stared at a childish pink Neko clock through her round framed glasses. Around her neck was a long golden chain with a Nazi swastika at the end, and over her shoulder was an old musket rifle. She huffed, ignoring the large red swastika made of dried blood that she sat on. "Only 36 more hours and 15 minutes. Oh, I can't wait. Oh, I just can't wait. We've lost communication with the aircraft carrier, Eagle, 18 hours ago." Sir Penwood of the Royal Navy spoke as he sat at a round table in the middle of the command room, looking at the younger blonde woman seated across from him with a military overcoat draped across her shoulders. "She's still anchored approximately 300 kilometers off the coast of the bay. We've confirmed that she's flying their colors." Integra picked up a satellite photo and nodded, seeing the bloody swastika on the ship's deck and biting on the end of her cigar, Millennium. That's why we've called you, Sir Penwood stated. The situation on board of the Eagle is far outside of the Royal Navy's jurisdiction. What is the situation? Integra questioned in a monotone voice. Penwood looked to the man next to him. As the general stated, we've lost all contact with the Eagle. They've even ignored all of our emergency hails. Satellite photos show us a lone individual on deck as well as the Nazi emblem. 2 SAS platoons are approaching the ship by helicopter as we speak. General, Integra started while giving Penwood a look. Those men are not prepared for what they're about to face. She was cut off by a loud beeping noise. General, the 2 choppers have been shot down, a technician called out from his station. What? Penwood exclaimed. Has the Eagle engaged their weapons systems? No sir, reports indicate that it was a single musket shot, the man replied, sounding disbelieving. Integra closed her eyes and stood up. Gentlemen, as of now, the Hellsing organization is taking full control of this operation. She spoke out, causing the military officials who also sat at the table to go into an uproar. Penwood nodded, already knowing what was going on, and gave her full command without any fuss at all. Moments later, she and Walter were walking down the halls to leave the base and talking about how they could handle this problem. I don't suppose we could just ignore the damn thing, she huffed with Walter trailing behind. I mean, how do we deal with a boat full of ghouls? Walter gave her a small chuckle. Sir Integra, you clearly forget that the problem with sending Alucard or emissaries across the water doesn't affect Mr. Uzumaki. Of course, the woman muttered, but how do we? Gier only sighed. On board the Eagle, the team on Nazis on the control tower busied themselves with watching the radar and the ship's systems while waiting for the next attack. They were prepared for anything. Anti-aircraft missiles were armed, high-caliber gating guns ready to fire on any small watercraft, and missiles were ready to lock onto anything. Add the fact that they had their leader on deck with her magic musket, and they were prepared for a long wait. First Lieutenant Rip Van Winkle sat on the deck, humming her favorite opera tunes and occasionally standing up to dance and twirl her rifle around while she was well into her tune of Der Freischütz when a dark sensation overtook her. What is this feeling? She gasped out as she dropped to her knees, her long legs growing weak. The intercom of the ship buzzed to life as one of the vampires she brought with her asked what was wrong, only for the sounds of screaming and gunfire to echo all over the ship thanks to the intercom. What is happening? She cried out in fright as memories of the monster from 50 years ago reached her memories. It can't be him. No, it cannot be. The speakers died for a moment before coming back to life, playing her favorite opera of Der Freischütz like a final symphony to lead them all into death. By God! How sad the hunters sprit. For my heart will not cease to tremble, she whispered out, the opera's now haunting melody filling her ears. Soon the entire tower where the controls were, along with most of the vampires burst into flames. Naruto laughed darkly as he stood in the control tower of the aircraft carrier, each vampire burning until even their ash ceased to exist. The metal walls and most of the equipment was burning, but somehow, the music that he had turned on as a mocking joke as he killed these vermin continued to play. Walking to the broken window, the fires not bothering him in the least, he spotted the woman on deck and vanished, reappearing behind her. How sad, such a cute vampire. He mused, causing the woman to turn and yelp, fear in her eyes, and now, I must capture you. Seeing that it wasn't the monster from her past, Rip Van Winkle quickly regained her courage and aimed her musket. Die, you filthy dog. The gun went off and Naruto blinked as he was thrown back by the musket shot, the round blowing through him like a cannon before returning and hitting him again and again. He suddenly disappeared from his place, causing the musket ball to pierce the metal deck before reappearing next to the girl, his revolver lightly touching her cheek. Now that was new, magic bullets. I must say, I've never encountered that before. She heard him the gun and gulped. You mean to kill me? He hummed, nope. Rip Van Winkle felt his pistol stop touching her just a moment before the barrel slammed into her face. We need you alive for now, he told her before grabbing her neck, but that chip inside you will be a problem. It must be removed, and seeing as I don't have the time to conduct a rather invasive search, I'll just have to go with plan B. She really didn't understand, but soon felt her body heat up until it felt like she was about to be burned alive, causing her to kick and scream, and he held her up. Naruto used his powers to heat every part of her body, destroying the chip inside of her before dropping the girl, who had long since passed out from the pain of being basically cooked alive. Oh, this interrogation will be fun. Sitting in his large chair, which only helped show just how much smaller he was, the Major watched the large screen on the far wall with a small glare. Before him stood two large groups of Nazi soldiers and officers, while next to him stood the rest of his elite soldiers, all watching the screen with looks of disbelief. The man closest to him, a tall, lanky blonde wearing a blood-stained lab coat with a pair of goggles, held a finger between his teeth, biting down until blood seeped through the glove. "My doctor," the Major started without glancing away. "This was not a part of our plan." The doctor nodded slowly. "I am sorry, Major," he replied, his voice muffled through his finger. "We did not anticipate them sending the demon over the vampire. Considering Alucard's past with us, this will set us back." The Major hummed, seemingly not angry. "With Alucard still in the city and not trapped on the ship surrounded by water, we cannot hope to fulfill our plans." "Shall I halt our attack, sir?" "For now, my doctor, for now." "What about the girl?" a woman asked, holding a giant scythe over her shoulder. The Major hummed for a moment. "She was never meant to survive this night. Her capture has cost us deeply, and now she shall suffer for it." How many days had it been? Days, weeks, months. How many days had it been since she had been forced to suffer this pain? The sensation of starvation, torture, and most of all, fear. For years she had remembered the feeling of that monster's presence whom slaughtered her friends in the Nazi research bunkers, the monster whom deemed her too lowly of an insect to crush. But now that monster was replaced by another. Mocking crimson eyes bled to a cruel mix of yellow, orange, black, and red. An arrogant smirk twisted into a vicious grin. Long flowing black hair changed to a golden blonde. The monster that had once haunted her dreams had been replaced by a deeper evil, a devil. Rip Van Winkle shivered in her prison of stone, too frightened to escape, too terrified that he'd be the first to find her. The door to her room was not locked. She was not chained, tied, or even bound at all. The only binding that kept her in place was her deep-seated fear of the Hellsing demon whom put her here and what he had told her. "Welcome to your new home. There is no lock on this door, but know this: should you attempt to flee, you deal with me and you'll find that my punishments are far worse than one could imagine." The voice still haunted her, floating in her mind and impossible to ignore. Despite the fact that he had yet to even harm or question her, she was not going to press any luck that she still had. She knew full well what happened to most female prisoners, even if their captors seemed to treat them well for the public view. Female POWs, while seemingly luckier than their male counterparts, were forced to trade beatings, slave labor, and piss-poor hygiene for degradation and forced prostitution. It wasn't like the demon hadn't had the chance. She still felt the humiliation as she was stripped of her suit by the blonde. Everything from her jacket, pants, shirt, tie, shoes, socks, were all taken and replaced with some gray cotton pants and a matching shirt. All throughout the strip she had been expecting him to hold her down and forcibly take her like she had seen others Nazis do to prisoners in the past. Every minute that passed only worried her more. Was he only trying to lull her into a false sense of security just to snatch it away? But it was only when she was put into this room did she begin to calm down, although only a bit. But still, being in the room was maddening. What would happen to her? What was Hellsing going to do with her? Unknown to Rip Van Winkle, she was being watched by Integra and Naruto through a small hidden camera while they stood in her office, looking at the screen of her new computer. "What did you do to her, Naruto?" Integra asked after a moment, wondering what he had done to reduce a vampire to this. You didn't." Naruto hummed. "Of course not, is a sickening thing that even I did not stand for within hell. Physically, I did nothing once she was captured, but once she was here I simply threatened her that should she try to escape, I would be the one to deal with her." "So you just locked her in there?" Naruto was silent for a moment. "Actually, that door is one that me and Alucard broke during one of our fights. The lock hasn't worked for nearly 2 years." That caused her eyes to widen before she looked at him with a glare. "What? I told both you and Walter that it needed to just look at her. It's only been close to, I'd say 6 hours, and she hasn't even gone near the door." Integra calmed down just as Walter entered with a tray holding a pot of tea and a glass. "Have you questioned her?" she asked while the butler served her some of the tea. already knowing what she liked to have in it. The demon shook his head and gave her a blank stare. You honestly expect me to interrogate her? That would be like using a flamethrower to light a cigar. It's been done before. Walter mused out loud. You remember, don't you, Sir Integra? He trailed off at her glare. Ah, never mind. Integra stopped glaring but noticed that Walter wasn't leaving, meaning that he must have something to say to her. Is there anything else? The man nodded. Why, actually yes. There is something you must see. Walter asked to use her computer and went on the web, typing in some things and pulling up a video. Our researchers found this and brought it to our attention, Sir Integra. The man told her as the video loaded and began to play. Both blondes watched the video showing people being murdered. What is this, Walter? Integra demanded after watching the clip. That is a snuff film, Sir Integra. It is a video of a murder made for the purpose of entertainment and financial gain. Why are you showing me this? Walter said nothing, only clicking the time bar and pulling it to a certain time before pausing it. Dear Lord, the woman muttered as her heart dropped. On the arm of the murderer was the Hellsing coat of arms. We're being set up. Naruto studied the screen, which gave a good view out of a window. Walter. He spoke out, catching their attention. Isn't this the raid on the apartment building a week ago? The man nodded. Yes, but that's not all. He went to the news website and pulled up the live news broadcast. The screen loaded to show the news anchor with another snuff film going on that was much like the one from before, but this time, it was live. Right now, special forces, possibly part of a government agency, are attacking with deadly force in the town of Camden. Sir Integra, Walter spoke over the news, our soldiers have been sent to clear a group of ghouls and a vampire inside the town of Camden. Ms. Victoria has been sent with them. Not a minute later, thanks to Integra's calls, the news station was shut down for the night. The newswoman, a cute blonde with blue eyes, was angry that they had cut her off the air, especially after she knew that vampires had existed. Not long ago, she had been attacked by one and was saved by a lone sniper round from the darkness. This set her on a mission to expose the truth. Another call to the unit commander had them hunting down the person recording it, only to find him hiding in the basement. He was caught and arrested, now facing trial for terrorism. But while he was being checked out by doctors, a vial of his blood vanished and fell into the hands of Alucard, who happily drank it, causing him to gain the man's memories and to expose the person who'd betrayed them. So, I'm being teamed up with the police girl? Naruto mused as Integra briefed him on his job. Strange. Isn't she usually with her master, my queen? Removing her cigar, she crushed the end in the ashtray. Usually, but I have another matter that will take his skills to deal with. Naruto stared at her for a second. You sent him off hunting vampires again, didn't you? No, she snapped. We got some blood from our prisoner and he'll be reporting what he finds. We are not the type to stoop to torture as the first resort. We save it for later. Naruto shrugged. Oh well, I was just hoping to get a few good laughs out of sending him on a wild goose chase. Again, but that begs the question, what will you do with Ms. Rip Van Winkle? He asked, only for Integra to give him a blank glance. I see. Well then, I wish you a pleasant evening, my queen. He gave a little bow and faded away. Hunting down his new partner, Naruto found the blue-eyed vampire sitting in her room, staring into a bowl of tomato soup, one of the few things that her kind could use as a replacement for blood. It would keep her from going hungry, but she wouldn't grow stronger like she would while drinking blood, something that she would be forced to do sooner or later. Is there a problem with your meal, Ceres? Naruto questioned from behind her, causing her to yelp, throwing her spoon in the air. If need be, I'm sure Walter has a funnel around here somewhere. Taking a minute to calm her breathing, Ceres asked what he was doing in her room. Sir Integra has an assignment for us. Eat and prepare yourself. We are hunting down a traitor. Naruto told his fellow blonde with a smirk on his face. She nodded. So master has finished his assignment? No, it is you and I. Your master will still be busy. Now, enough questions. Eat and report to the armory. We leave in 15 minutes. The plan was simple. From the memories Alucard gained, the man that was captured before had been working together with another hacker and a Hellsing soldier who wanted the world to know what they did, wanting to be recognized for slaying vampires and get the glory. They even had a vampire working with them, more than happy to star in snuff films and feast of stupid humans that were lured in. The hacker was to meet the other two at their latest film shoot in the basement of an old meat packing place. Having told Ceres to proceed from the ground floor, Naruto would go directly to where he sensed not 4 presences, one being a vampire, another being the intended victim, and the last 2 being the hacker and the Hellsing traitor, but 5. Appearing in the darkness of the basement, he looked around at the sight that greeted him. So is this for real? I can get high forever and not have to pay a fortune to a dealer? Naruto sneered at the human, a drug addict who was easily lured in by the idea of a cheap high. Across from the addict was a pale, shirtless man who smirked, showing off his fangs as he approached the other man. The vampire grabbed the human's head and held it back. Hey, what are you gay? The man shrieked as its head neared Mon's neck. He must be. Naruto spoke up, stopping the vampire in his tracks, kind of sad that he must lure other men down into a dark room to have his way with, but judging by that hideous face, it's probably the only way he could get some. Who the hell are you? The vampire demanded, his voice deep and throaty, while picking up the man by his throat. The man tried to struggle but was soon thrown to the side, where he hit the wall with a crunch and fell down, dead. Oh look, you killed your boyfriend. Naruto mused, but aren't you supposed to be fucking him before you killed him? After all, you are on camera. You talk too much, it growled while pulling out a pistol and shooting Naruto point blank in the chest and head 3 times. The bullets popped out of him and the wounds closed, leaving the vampire in shock. Hee, how pathetic, you are just a poor lowly vampire that has become a freak show to entertain humans. Naruto chuckled while pulling out his shotgun, having not used it in a while. That worthless pistol, this is a real gun. The blast was ear-splitting, the one-way glass shattering next to them to reveal the 3 that were watching just as the vampire's head exploded in a shower of blood, bone, and gray matter. We were just watching, one of the 3 said, revealing herself to be the news anchor from the news report hours ago. The man next to her pulled out a Hellsing-issued handgun and aimed it at Naruto. This guy is the one I've told you about, the Hellsing agency's pet demon. Stedler, former captain of the Hellsing organization task force, Naruto mused without even aiming at him. Your betrayal of my master and our commander is unforgivable, you will pay. Just then, Ceres stepped in, aiming her gun at the man, having heard everything. Naruto. Don't kill him, he should be tried and punished. Naruto raised an eyebrow and holstered his handheld shotgun, causing the former soldier to right. Victoria, he spoke as he dropped the gun and raised his hands. I was faithful to my duty. You want him arrested then, Ceres? Naruto mused before nodding to the man, then cuff him. She walked over and cuffed his hands behind his back before Naruto approached and stood in front of him. Stedler, Naruto called, getting the man's attention before pulling out his revolver. You're under arrest, but your crime is unpunishable by human courts. Here and now, you are judged a traitor and here you will die. No, I was faithful. He was forever silenced by a single bullet. Ceres and the other 2 were covered in the blood spray that came from the exit wound, putting them into a state of shock. Traitors are not tolerated. When you join us, you enter a pact to never betray the organization and to protect the kingdom from the supernatural forces that wish to cause harm. Naruto said, spitting on the fallen corpse before looking to the anchor lady. Your crimes are just as terrible. You believe that by just watching that you are innocent. Well, you are wrong. You've endangered the lives of many people, and for what? A story? I can see your mind, and what you have done is unforgivable. By order of Integra Hellsing of the Hellsing organization, with the authority of Her Majesty the Queen of England, you are Irby's sentenced to death. She was never able to utter a word before her life was ended in the blink of an eye. So, Millennium planned to stage an attack on Britain. The operation with the ship was just a decoy. Integra nodded. It would appear so. From what we can see, Alucard's inability to cross large bodies of water was to give them the time needed to attack. With you here, they only had to worry about holding you off and not 2 of you. Naruto hummed as he stood across from his fellow blonde, having returned from his job after burning the bodies, much to Ceres's horror. She had already been in a state of shock from the man's head exploding right in her face. Watching as he killed the other 2 and burned them like trash was a new level of brutality that she had yet to witness from even Alucard. So we now have time to prepare for this little Nazi invasion, he mused while crossing his arms and looking up. Was there anything else the prisoner knew? Integra shook her head. No, she was rather cooperative with us, but knew nothing else about their plans. She was rewarded with a quick death. She saw that he frowned a bit. What? Is something wrong with that? Not at all, my queen, but but it is sad to know that our dungeon will no longer be graced by her rather cute rear," he hummed, making Integra smirk. "Oh," she exclaimed, "what is this? Have you got a crush of the late Rip Van Winkle?" He snorted, as if, while I continue to pine for my lovely queen, it doesn't mean I can't look at another. Naruto was cut off by a stapler to the nose. "Now that was not called for my queen," he mumbled while rubbing the now broken appendage. Her aim and throwing strength was getting better. He grabbed his nose between two fingers and popped it back into place with a crunch. "Just tell me the short version of your report. I don't know how we got off topic," Integra growled out, massaging a pulsing vein on her forehead. "As you wish." Sarah's wanted to have the traitor arrested and sent to trial in a human court. Having now worked here as long, she did not understand the severity of the Mont's actions or the punishment. "So I let her arrest him, but did as you ordered and executed the man." She was not ready for that and fell into a state of shock as I continued and executed the other hacker as well as the newswoman I told you about. I then proceeded to pile the bodies and equipment in the center of the room and burned them with my hellfire. No evidence will be found there. "Good, now you are dismissed. Go and do whatever it is that you do. Just leave me alone for now." Hours later, Walter was headed towards Naruto's room to find the man. They had a visitor and Integra wanted him to tell him to not harass said person. He had expected the blonde to be near when the visitor arrived, but he hadn't shown up at all, which was strange. Naruto was like Alucard when it came to these things, and it was unsettling for him to miss this. "Mr. Uzumaki," he called while knocking on the door. There was a silence before he heard a low breathing sound from the room. Considering that it was in there, it had to be loud, seeing as the door was almost 3 inches of solid wood and iron while the walls were made of stone. He knocked again, only for the door to open slightly. "Mr. Uzumaki," he called out again while pushing it open. Inside he saw the blonde sitting with his legs crossed in the middle of the floor, eyes wide open and mouth half closed, but the strangest thing was that he was floating and seemingly in a trance. He suddenly heard a hissing noise and leapt back as a long, shadowy serpent-like creature lunged at him, only to slam into an invisible barrier at the door. Walter, despite having fought vampires, werewolves, and Nazis in his past, was frightened by what he saw and felt his heart beating wildly in his chest. All inside the dark room, the shadows seemed to be alive, moving around the blonde within. Every now and then he saw a pair of glowing eyes stare at him in the darkness, moving around and watching him with the intention of causing harm should he enter the room again. "Can I help you, Walter?" His attention turned to the blonde, causing his blood to chill at the sight of his eyes that bored into his own. They weren't blue, nor were they that strange crimson. They were black, solid black, no white, blue, or red in sight. The demonic blonde floated a bit higher and stretched his legs out, lowering himself down to his feet. When Walter saw his eyes again, they had changed back into the normal shade of blue that he had always seen before. My word, what was that? Naruto looked around and snapped his fingers, causing all the movement in the room to stop and fade away. "Forgive me, Walter, but I was not expecting to be bothered for quite some time. What you saw was a ritual of cosmic consciousness and demonomancy. Very dark power, considered to be of the blackest of magics. What was that strange thing that attacked me?" Naruto frowned. "That thing is a creature. A spirit, to be exact. The one that attacked you was Adertutela. One of my more protective spirits. They protect me while I'm in a trance or do my rituals," he told the aged man while popping his neck. "You were rather lucky to have jumped back when you did. Had it bitten you, your soul may have been lost forever." "A familiar spirit?" Walter spoke. "Having heard of those, aren't they considered to be an abomination to the Lord?" Naruto nodded. "That is what you'll hear. But as usual, humanity fears what they do not understand, branding it dark or evil. I'll admit, some are true monsters. That serpent was a creature from hell that has been bound to me for, well, I've forgotten just how long. Another is the spirit of a lost pup, looking for its mother after being abandoned with its brothers and sisters by a cruel owner." A small blue light appeared near Naruto's feet and took the shape of a ghostly white puppy, sitting on its hind legs and looking around with a small whine before disappearing. "But you came for something other than to ask of my familiar spirits. What is it?" Walter made a "oh" face. "Ah, yes. Sir, Integra sent me to inform you that you are not to harass her guest at all." "Guest?" Naruto repeated, as if the word were new to him. Since when did she have guests coming over for social visits? Last time I checked, she had the social life of a shrew. Well, Walter began, biting his lip at the crack towards Integra's lack of socialization. It isn't a friend visiting but her sister. Sister? Naruto repeated, a shocked look on his face. She has a sister? Walter nodded. Indeed she does. Her name is Laura Windgates Hellsing. Wait. You mean to tell me that you didn't sense her arrival? I've been busy with my rituals. These things take up a lot of time. The blonde deadpanned before looking thoughtful, but Integra did say not to harass her sister. She didn't say anything about introducing myself. But do tell me, Walter, is she attractive? Walter grinned. If only I were a few years younger. That made Naruto smirk and snort. You'd still have no chance, you'd need to be around 30 years younger. Walter lost his grin and frowned, says the demon whose age has more numbers than our zip code. And yet I can still vigorously use my hips without fear of throwing my back out. Oh, that was low, Naruto smirked. If the rumors of what happened to older men are true, so are your balls. He chuckled before vanishing into thin air, leaving Walter slack-jawed and speechless. Thank you, Lord, for answering my prayers. Now please, please, please let them be twins. Naruto pleaded as he hunted down his master and her sister. Come on twins, come on twins. He found them in Integra's office and sighed sadly. They weren't twins, but damn did she look good. Laura Hellsing had the same hair and eyes as Integra, but her skin was pale while Integra's was tanned. She also didn't wear glasses like her sister and had a long curtain of hair over her right eye. A pair of red oval-shaped earrings hung from her ears, and she wore a long green dress while she sat on a chair against the wall near Integra's desk. Naruto nearly started to pout, having dreamed of a threesome with two Integras before, but accepted that at least he now had a chance with two attractive Hellsing sisters. Don't you ever get lonely living here, Integra? Laura questioned to her sister after a moment, breaking Naruto out of his thoughts as Integra slowly rubbed her eyes, breathing a bit heavier than normal. Why? Don't you stay here tonight? Integra droned out, her voice sounding a bit tired and weak. I'll have Walter prepare a room for you. What the hell? Naruto wondered from his darkened corner. That was hypothesis. That would explain the sudden appearance of a sister that he had never heard of during the years that he had been here. Hypothesis only worked on humans. She must have hypnotized them into thinking that she was really a Hellsing. The imposter stood up, thanking Integra before leaving the room. Neither knew that their watcher had left. So you felt it as well? Alucard hummed from his seat while drinking his wine. The intruder within the manor. Naruto faded from the shadows. My powers are being restored. I've been busy all day today and only just noticed upon seeing her. He told the Count. A user of hypothesis. A strong one too. She used eye contact and aura to subject our master to her will. A vampire with strong hypothesis. Alucard hummed while swirling his wine. What were they called? Ah yes. Baopan Sith. Pronounced Bavan Shi. Naruto crossed his arms. Strange. I wasn't aware that they gave different names to vampires that used certain powers. It is mainly a Scottish term. He added with a shrug. But their powers don't affect stronger beings such as us. I see. Well, if you'll excuse me, I got an imposter to kill, Naruto said with a chuckle before vanishing again. Integra grimaced as Laura ripped her shirt apart, revealing her bra. The woman had just returned and said that the rest of the family was doing well. Only there were no other Hellsings. That was when she realized that Laura was a fake. Too bad the vampire had as well. Laura Hellsing smirked to herself as she licked her sister's breast. Having realized that she messed up, she decided to go ahead with her plan of turning Integra into a ghoul, but couldn't help but want to play with her food. But suddenly, she was no longer licking the woman's tanned breast but rising up off the floor. Naruto stood behind her and smirked as he picked her up with his darker powers, something that he really didn't use as much, and threw her to the side, slamming her into the wall and cracking the wood paneling. Brave of you to walk into the lion's den, Naruto said as the vampire fell to the floor with a loud cough, the air having been knocked out of her and releasing Integra. I mean, not only is there two vampires here but a demon as well, now that takes balls. The vampire looked at him and tried to use her power. It's useless to try that, Naruto told her with a smirk. I'm on even terms with the devil now, and you think some lowly thing like you can bend me to your will? She only glared and tried harder, unable to stand as his power held her down. How weak. Naruto smirked. Let me show you true power. His eyes turned solid black and her arms moved out to the side before her entire upper body was bent back while her legs remained and pelvis remained firmly on the ground. The bones in her back crunched and popped as they were broken and bent way too far. She screamed as her back was broken but still couldn't move as she continued to slowly bend back to the point where her head nearly touched the small of her back. "This is the difference between us," Naruto hissed. "I far surpass a weakling such as you. You dare manipulate my queen and pose as a sister she does not have. Your fate has been decided, you will die." Unable to speak but able to scream, the vampire was lifted up from the floor and released from her back-breaking bend. But then, she was held in the like a cross and started bending back again until her back and spine snapped, leaving her laying on the back of her legs. Dead. Well, deader. As it turned to dust, Naruto turned and approached Integra, who was glaring at the pile of dust with a disgusted look. "Are you okay, my queen?" She nodded as he knelt down, checking for any bites or wounds. "I do not see any bites," he started only to be cut off by her lips pressing into his. Naruto was the first to break the kiss. No matter how long he had been waiting for this to happen once again, he couldn't allow her to do this right now. Last thing he needed was for someone too important to kill to walk in and see Integra Hellsing fornicating with a demon. "Stop this, my queen," he told her in a hushed tone while pulling back from her soft lips, much to her annoyance. "We cannot do this here." "So everything you said before was a lie?" she hissed at him with a glare. "I want this but now you don't want me?" Her glare faded as his hand caressed her cheek. "I have wanted you ever since I first met you," he cooed to her lovingly, leaning in close, "but when I have you, I want it to be so neither of us regret it. It is far too open here. Should someone walk in on us, then the world shall know that Integra Hellsing gave herself to what she fights. They will know that you are no longer a maiden, and I know how much you wish to keep that fact a secret." As he spoke, his other hand did not stay idle, lightly running his fingers down her ribs, across her torso, then to her inner thigh, making her face light up. "So my queen, don't you ever dare say that I don't want you," he finished out with a hiss. She couldn't help but quiver as his hot breath brushed against her neck. He was getting nearer and nearer with each passing second before his tongue lightly ran up her neck, sending chills down her spine. "But, if you wish it, I will meet you within your room tonight." Naruto spoke, seeing as she had yet to say a word. "There. I will fulfill both of our desires and make you feel like a brand new woman. My queen." With Integra now in a deep sleep, Naruto got out of her bed. A queen-sized mattress covered in fine sheets and fit for a queen. How appropriate in his mind. Slipping from her needy grasp, he placed a soft kiss upon her forehead and turned to dress himself. Pulling on his clothing and undershirt, he spared a glance to the small digital clock on her nightstand, reading 3:21 in the morning before vanishing from the room. He took step into his room and was greeted by the unearthly coldness that sent a chill down his own spine. "What brings death to my humble abode?" he mused while looking to the lone chair he had in his room, which the pale gaunt figure of death sat upon while eating a bag of pork. "Skbe wiping your hands on my chair," he hissed out a second later. Death, as usual, didn't show a bit of emotion. "I've been waiting for you for some time now," he drawled tonelessly while digging through the bag and popping another fried pork skin into his mouth. "Is that so?" Naruto spoke as he closed the door behind him. "So what are you here for? You're not one to make social calls." Death nodded. "I'm not here on official business. I came here to offer you a deal." "A deal?" the blonde repeated with a sharp undertone. "You want to offer me a deal? Forgive me if I'm wrong, but the last time you offered me a deal, it was a trick to steal my soul." Death only shrugged, "And I paid dearly for that in the end, so I do not see what your problem is. I'm offering you a real deal this time. I need your help on this. My lower reapers are too busy and I cannot officially walk this earth. I am already breaking numerous rules in coming here." Naruto studied the head reaper for a moment. "So you want my help? What do I get in return?" he questioned the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. "I'm offering you something that you always wanted," Death told him slowly while holding up his right hand, showing the silver ring that looked much like the one Naruto had. "I've seen how you carry that knockoff of my own ring, wearing it to the meeting with your master to meet the queen of this land." The blonde's eyes widened. "You'd offer me your powers?" Death raised one eyebrow. "Unlike my weaker fellow horseman, my power does not come from my ring. But to a certain extent, yes, I can give you the powers of a reaper. All I want you to do is kill a certain group." "Millennium," Naruto supplied. seeing as they were really the only group he and Death ever spoke about before. Death shook his head. Of course not. I wouldn't offer you any reward for that, seeing as you will fight them sooner or later. No, I want you to destroy a group of mortals. Mortals? You want me to kill a group of humans? Yes, and you will want them dead as well. Death told him with a bit of anger flashing through his eyes, the first show of emotion he had really ever shown before. These humans are going to upset the balance. They're attempting to use a ritual to summon me and then bind me using some unseemly little spell. And this warrants their death because... Why? Surely this isn't the first time someone's tried to enslave you with a spell that they found on the internet. No, it's not. Death started while eating another chip. But this is the first time where it could actually work. He nodded at Naruto's surprised look. Yes, a mortal with power over death, imagine the chaos. So, I kill these people and you give me that ring? Death nodded, holding out his pale, bony hand. Indeed, but I must warn you, this ring will not last. The more you use it, the quicker it becomes a useless novelty. You will only have a certain amount of my power inside this. So do we have a deal? It went without saying, Naruto had made a deal with Death. Killing said group was simple enough. It was traveling across the world to the US that was a bitch. He could travel nearly anywhere in the blink of an eye, but the further away it was, the more tiresome the trip. But he had found the cultists right where he had been told to look and killed them with ease before removing anything that had to do with the binding spell that they were going to use. Returning to the UK, he found his new ring waiting for him on his chair while Death was nowhere in sight. Upon putting it on, knowledge flooded his mind, telling him how to use certain powers and giving him a feeling of how much power he had in the ring. While some would say that the deal was one-sided, that temporary Reaper power wasn't good enough, he knew that he was never really meant to have this power at all. Unlike his demonic powers, which filled his veins with liquid fire, or his one-time holy power that made him feel at peace, this power made him shiver as if his blood had turned to ice. This power, he muttered in awe, ignoring the chill that engulfed his being, simply amazing. Days passed by and all seemed normal. Well, normal in terms of working in Hellsing. It was as if there wasn't a looming threat of Nazi vampires attacking to destroy Britain. Integra would act as if nothing had happened between them around the others, but once they were alone, she would be much more affectionate. Never anything like hugs, kisses, flowers, or love notes. Nothing romantic, but she wouldn't throw things at him for his subtle and not so subtle innuendo, and even shot one back every now and then. Walter, having already figured out that there was a little something going on between them, instantly noticed how much more relaxed his boss was and would have this little smirk on his face every time he saw the pair together. Sarah's, while utterly clueless about the affair between her master's master and the demonic blonde, had a slight fear of him now and would avoid him. After that assignment they went on, where he killed the man she was handcuffing. The younger blonde had finally seen what a monster he was. She had seen Alucard in action before, so the Count's ruthlessness came to her as no surprise. But Naruto, the one who she had thought that she could go to for help and advise when she couldn't go to anyone else, the man she had thought of as a kind person. He had executed the one-time Hellsing soldier without warning and right in front of her. But other than that, nothing else was really happening. Naruto. Hearing his name being called, Naruto's eyes snapped open. Sitting up in his bed, he blinked as he found himself in a strange cartoon-like world. Buildings in the background were poorly drawn and a few cars zoomed back and forth. Where the fuck am I? He deadpanned before catching sight of a bald, overweight man floating a few inches off the ground. He wore an orange tank top, brown pants, no shoes, and had these small square-shaped glasses on his face while a holstered pistol was under his arm. I am the spirit of you, gun, the bald man cheered out as he floated, punching the air above him with his fist, making the blonde sick at the sight of his jiggling. The spirit of your angelic weapon. Ever so slowly, Naruto pulled his pistol from underneath his pillow and took aim before firing. Wah! The man cried out as he ducked the round, which shattered one of the poorly drawn skyscrapers in the back. What are you doing? Naruto fired 2 more times, both bullets being dodged. Please just hear me out. The tubby man fell back as a bullet hit his sunglasses, throwing them off his face. Ow, hey, that hurt. Naruto aimed the hammer and fired again, finally hitting the person and turning his face into an open hole. I'm so fucking confused right now. He deadpanned before getting his pants on and checking the clock. It was around midday. Integra should be up and eating breakfast right now. Good afternoon, Naruto. Integra greeted as her secret lover appeared in a dark corner of her office. Any news on that thing we talked about? Naruto blinked. She had been getting better and better at sensing him when he arrived. She said that it was because he now had this cold feeling that followed him around, meaning that she could feel the aura of the death ring on his finger. Yes, actually. I came to tell you that the ritual is ready and I am going to be performing it. As a safety precaution, I must inform you not to send anyone into my room or else they might ruin it or die. She had known about his ability to use black magic or witchcraft for a long time, having caught him once in the past. At the time, she had been unsupportive of it and was rather pissed at him, but later learned that it was in fact black magic that bound Alucard to the Hellsing family. It soon became one of those, out of sight, out of mind deals between them. She ignored his use of the art just as he ignored her occasional use of drugs to help keep her awake while doing her paperwork. But this was the first time she had ever asked him to use it for them. She wanted to know when TK and had asked him to use one of the divination rituals to find out. I will see that everyone is informed, Integra told him. How long will it be? There is no telling, he answered. I may find out in moments or it may take hours. Then run along. Enough standing around. Report your findings when you can. Sitting on the floor in the center of a pentagram drawn in his own blood, Naruto took a deep breath of the incense that he had lit for this and began to channel his powers while chanting lowly under his breath. Candles stood at each point of his pentagram, the small flames flickering slowly until they went out one by one, each lighting back up in a blackish flame as his shadow creatures slowly took form around him. His eyes turned black and slowly, Naruto lost much of his feeling and went numb in mind and body, slowly falling into a self-induced trance. Images raced through his mind's eye, telling him of the attack that would happen soon, much too soon for his liking. With that knowledge in mind, he switched gears and channeled his power once more, vanishing from the manor, but leaving his body behind. The Major smirked in his seat while thinking of the approaching bloodshed, the war that was about to take off, leaving untold masses of dead in their wake. Sir, it's time for your speech, the doctor told him as the group of men in front of him waited for him to start, seeing as he had to wait for the speaker systems around the base to be prepared so that the whole place could hear him. Good, let's not keep them waiting. The Major chuckled before standing up. My friends, it has often been said that I like war. He started while looking at the assembled group below him as his elite stood by his side. Friends, I like war. No, friends, I love war. I love holocausts. I love blitzkriegs. I love defensive lines. I love sieges, charges. I love mop-up operations, and retreats. Wars across prairies, in streets, in trenches, in grasslands, in frozen tundras, through deserts, on the sea, in the air. I love every act of war that can occur upon this earth. He stopped and took a few breaths before grinning and starting back. I love blasting the enemy to smithereens with artillery salvos that thunder across the lines of battle. My heart leaps with joy whenever a soldier is tossed into the air and cut to pieces by well-placed sniper rounds. And there is nothing like a tank operator using a Tiger 88 to destroy enemy tanks. And the feeling that comes when a soldier runs screaming from his blazing tank only to be mowed down by heavy machine gun fire is such an exquisite feeling. Like when ranks of infantry brandish their bayonets rushing into the enemy line. It moves me deep within my heart to watch a fresh recruit stabbing over and over into the bloated chest of a long-dead enemy. The short and thick man laughed at the mental picture his words created. The sight of deserters being strung up from a street lamp is an irresistible pleasure, and there is nothing more arousing than the sounds made by prisoners of war dropping like flies, screaming in agony as they're mowed down by ear-piercing Schmeissers, which are MP40s. When a band of pitiful resistance fighters makes their final stand with nothing but small arms, only to have their cities smashed to atoms block by 4.8-ton bombshells, I'm in ecstasy. I love it when my forces are ravaged by a Russian armored division. It's so sad to see towns and villages that were supposed to be defended at all costs, being laid to waste, their women and children being killed. I love to be squashed under the heel of the British and American war machines. The humiliation, as my men crawl around like vermin, ducking the Yark bombers flying overhead. Gentlemen, all I ask for is war, a war so grand as to make hell itself tremble. Gentlemen, I ask you as fellow brothers in arms, what is it you really want? Do you wish for further war as I do? Do you wish for a merciless, bloody war? A war whose fury is built with iron, and lightning, and fire? Do you ask for war to sweep in like a tempest, leaving not even ravens to scavenge from this earth? He stopped and listened as his soldiers chanted, "Krieg," over and over, throwing their fists into the air in excitement. Very well. Then Krieg is what you shall have. We are a clenched fist, ready to strike down all who oppose us, with our might. But, after enduring over half a century wallowing in the darkness, for us, a simple, ordinary war will no longer be sufficient. We need a massive war. A war beyond any other that man's history has ever known. We are but a single battalion, the remnants of a defeated army numbering less than 1,000 strong. However, I believe that each of you old warriors is worth 1,000 of their sickly soft children. We represent a force that could easily defeat an army of 1,000,001 men. It is time for them to awake the ones who sent us screaming into oblivion, and who now lie sleeping. Let's drag them out of bed by the hair, and remind them of what we are. We will remind them of what it feels like to live in fear. We will remind them of the sound our jackboots make against their throats. We will remind them that there are more things between heaven and hell than are dreamt of in their philosophy. Our camp group of 1,000 battle-hardened warriors will burn this world down to ash. Yes, my friends, soon, Europe's charred remains will illuminate the night sky. I have brought you all back just as I promised I would. Back to our favorite battlefield. Back to our beloved war. At last the sea lion has crossed the ocean and is heading up the hill. Attention all soldiers of the Millennium Battalion, this is a message from your commander. Friends, let's bring them hell. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.